loopholes, and there are things that need to be fixed. So we want to make sure that we do that.
The new House bill means both branches of the legislature and Governor Baker all have an interest in adopting some sort of expanded liability protections for providers who offer abortions and their patients, but they'll now have to agree on the exact approach. Karen, in the newsroom, I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg 106.1 Boston Newburyport and 92.9 HD2.
All right, John, thank you. Well, the Boston School Committee will choose a new school superintendent at its meeting tonight. Somerville School Superintendent Mary Skipper and Boston Region 1 Superintendent Tommy Welch have made it to the final round. The decision comes as the NAACP is calling for a pause in the search process to allow for more diverse candidates. Elementary and Secondary Education Commissioner Jeff Riley earning top marks. The board voting unanimously to rate Riley's work over the most recent school year as a 4.75 out of 5, saying he has done a really admirable job at a very difficult time. Riley was also awarded a 2% salary increase effective July 3rd, which would push his compensation from around $257,000 a year as reported in state payroll records to more than $262,000 a year. Bay State Business Time 5:09. Let's see what's going on around the world. And here's Michael Barr. Michael.
Karen, former socialite Ghislaine Maxwell was sentenced to 20 years in prison for her role in helping Jeffrey Epstein sexually abuse underage girls. Prosecutors say Epstein would have been unable to exploit girls as young as 14 without the help of his longtime companion, Maxwell. Meanwhile, R&B star R. Kelly will be sentenced today in Brooklyn. He was convicted of racketeering and accused of sexual misconduct. The Federal Trade Commission alleges Walmart turned a blind eye to scam artists using its MoneyGram money transfer service. The FTC citing witnesses who say the retail giant rarely asked to see IDs of people who are receiving funds through the service. Walmart's called the suit factually flawed and legally baseless. Michael Barr, Bloomberg 106.1 Boston Newburyport and 92.9 HD2. Karen?
All right, Michael Barr, thank you. Well, Boston police have made 4 arrests in the brutal beating of a man outside South Station early Saturday morning. Police say all 4 suspects are juveniles and Boston residents. The teens allegedly beat a 20-year-old man in an attack that was captured on video, leaving the victim with a concussion, a broken nose, and other injuries. Employees at Boston's Museum of Fine Arts ratifying their first labor deal yesterday, becoming the latest prestigious art institution to protect workers with a union contract. The collective bargaining agreement is the first since museum workers voted to join the United Auto Workers Local 2110 in November of 2020. The union represents 227 of the museum's administrative, technical, curatorial, and conservation employees. Bay State Business Time is coming up to 5:11. Time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update with John Stashower. John.
Karen, the Red Sox trip to Toronto meant any Sox player unvaccinated couldn't go. So no Taylor Houck, who's become the Sox closer. They missed him last night, trying to protect a 1-run lead. Bottom of the 9th inning, they went first with Tyler Danish and then Hansel Robles, who blew a save for the 5th time. The Blue Jays scored twice in the 9th. They won 6-5. Toronto had led 3-0. The Sox had come back, helped by home runs by Trevor Story and Rob Refsnyder. First 2-game losing streak since May. They are just 2-7 versus the Jays this season. And Toronto now back in second place by a half game as they go into another game tonight. NBA free agency begins tomorrow night. We'll see if the Celtics are at all active. Not a huge class of free agents this year, but one name out there is Jalen Brunson. Had a 41-point playoff game for Dallas. Several reports that he is going to sign with the Knicks, where his father was recently named an assistant coach. Serena Williams now 40 years old. She hadn't played for a year, so not a shock that she was ousted in the first round at Wimbledon. Lost a third set tiebreaker to Harmony Tan of France. Coco Gauff survived, winning 7-5 in the third. Rafael Nadal won his opening rounder in 4 sets. With Bloomberg 106.1 Sports, I'm John Stashower.
All right, John, thank you. Well, after a nationwide search, Emmanuel College has named a new president. We get more from Bloomberg's Janet Wu.
Dr. Mary Boyd, a chemist, will become Emmanuel's 13th president. She has small college experience as current provost of Berry College in Georgia. She also served as a dean at UC San Diego. Emmanuel, founded in 1919 as a women's Catholic college, is now all gender. The Fenway campus just welcomed one of its largest incoming freshman classes ever. Janet Wu, Bloomberg 106.1, Boston Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2.
All right, Janet, thank you. Currently, it is 64 degrees, partly cloudy skies at Logan Airport. We have a check of your 3-day forecast, a look at traffic, all straight ahead on Bloomberg 106.1 Boston.
This is Tom Keene.
I'm Jonathan Ferro.
And I'm Lisa Abramowitz.
Join us later this morning for Bloomberg Surveillance.
At Sintra in Portugal, our Francine Lacroix in conversation with Jerome Powell, Christine Lagarde, and Andrew Bailey.
And the ambiguity of central banking policy for investors with Aaron Brown of PIMCO.
Bloomberg Surveillance starting at 7 a.m. on Bloomberg 106.1 Boston Newburyport and 92.9 HD2.
And watch us on Bloomberg Television.
Bridgebank helps breakthrough ideas actually break through and remains dedicated to providing financial solutions to the risk takers, the game changers, and the disruptors, those committed to making the world a better place. Bridgebank has been providing financial solutions to technology and innovation companies from inception to IPO and beyond for over 2 decades through its national network of banking teams and offices. Bridgebank, a division of Western Alliance Bank, member FDIC. Bridgebank, be bold, venture wisely.
When you're an innovative business, every blinking cursor is an opportunity. What will you do with it? Will you make something better or create something new? Our Dell Technologies advisors provide you with expertise and tools with Windows 11 to do incredible things. Because we believe there's an innovator in all of us. To do more with a Latitude laptop, Dell Technologies recommends Windows 11 Pro for business. Call a Dell Technologies advisor at 877-ASK-DELL.
Bay State Business Time is 5:14. We get a check of traffic now, and here's Malcolm Alter. Malcolm.
Thank you, Karen. This report is sponsored by Allstate. Route 24, all lanes are now open. Just after Route 106, that's where a dump truck struck the overpass about a couple of hours ago, and they had to shut down all lanes. But it's all wide open now, and it's all cleaned up. If you're coming up Route 95, you're in good shape from Pawtucket, Rhode Island up into Canton. Route 3 is a good ride from Plymouth to Braintree. The Southeast Expressway is wide open, about a 10-minute ride Braintree into downtown Boston. Morrissey Boulevard to Ponset River Bridge and Route 3A looking good. The Mass Turnpike is wide open, Sturbridge into downtown Boston. Route 9 is looking good from Westboro to Brookline Village. On Route 2, you've got a good ride from the Concord Rotary to Crosby's Corner. Inbound along the Charles River, Soldiers Field Road and Storrow Drive look good into Leverett Circle. Memorial Drive and Land Boulevard, along with the Fresh Pond and the Alewife Brook Parkways, are doing okay. The Leverett Connects are a little slow getting around the Garden Curve. The Tobin Bridge, the Sumner, Callahan, and Ted Williams tunnels not doing all that badly. Coming down Route 1 out of Newburyport, you're in good shape. 495 is a good ride. Amesbury to Hopkinton, the upper end of Route 128 is wide open from Gloucester down to the Mass Turnpike. Are you a safe driver? Are you looking to save money? With DriveWise from Allstate, the safer you drive, the more you can save. At Allstate, better protection costs a whole lot less. Visit allstate.com or call an agent for a quote today. I'm Malcolm Alter with the best ride in and out of the city on Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2. Karen?
All right, Malcolm, thank you. Now let's get a check of weather, and here's Rob Carolyn. Rob, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Looks like another nice day developing across New England. We've got high pressure building across the northern part of New England. Mostly sunny skies coming up for today with temperatures between 80 and 85. Frontal system sweeps across the area tonight. We're partly cloudy. May see a stray shower for lucky. Lows near 65. For tomorrow, it looks sunny and pleasant with temperatures between 80 and 85. Tomorrow night, generally clear, 65. Sunny, turning hot Friday, 90 to 95. A cold front will lead to showers and thunderstorms Saturday. Drive time, traffic, and weather updates all morning long. I'm Rob Carolyn on Bloomberg 106.1 Boston Newburyport and 92.9 HD2. Karen?
All right, Rob, thank you. And currently, it is 64 degrees at Logan Airport, 56 in Natick, and it's 60 degrees in Cohasset. And we have a check of the markets straight ahead in a day when futures, we're starting to see a lift there. They're moving higher. This is Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and stocks are dropping on renewed worries about economic growth as monetary policy tightens in much of the world to fight inflation. European equities are lower for the first time in 4 days, with sentiment also hurt by China remaining committed to its zero-COVID approach. U.S. stock index futures, meanwhile, are starting to move higher after a tech-led slide hurt the S&P 500 yesterday. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up about 4 points now. Dow futures up 45 and NASDAQ futures up 13. The DAX in Germany down 1.3%. The 10-year Treasury up 5/32, yield 3.15%. Yield on the 2-year 3.08%. NYMEX crude oil is up a third of a percent or 38 cents at $112.13 a barrel. COMEX gold down a tenth of a percent or $2.20 at $18.19 an ounce. The euro 1.0522 against the dollar. British pound 1.2188 and the yen 136.15. Looking at Bitcoin, it's down 0.75%. It's at $20,090. And today we are watching for a third reading of first quarter GDP out at 8:30 Wall Street time. And General Mills among companies scheduled to report earnings today. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. A former White House aide portrayed a violent and out-of-control Donald Trump in his presidency's final weeks, saying she was told that he reached for the steering wheel and lunged at a Secret Service agent who tried to stop him from traveling to the Capitol to join last year's insurrectionist mob on January 6th. Meanwhile, in a Truth Social post, former President Trump says it didn't happen. A historic NATO summit is getting underway in Madrid. Finland and Sweden are expected to get their invitations to join the alliance amid Russian aggression. In baseball, the Yankees beat the A's 2-1. The Mets lost. Along with the Red Sox and Orioles, the Nationals and Giants won. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Okay, Michael, thanks. It's 5:19 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. Now let's run down some of last night's primary results. We had 7 states heading to the polls last night. Also want to get to the explosive testimony we heard on Capitol Hill yesterday from former White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson. Greg Valliere is with us this morning to talk politics, Chief U.S. Policy Strategist at AGF Investments. Greg, good morning. Let's start off with the results in New York State. Of course, we have a governor's race coming up in November, and now the stage is set. Kathy Hochul taking on Lee Zeldin.
Yeah, good morning, Nathan. Good to be with you. Yeah, I think she's going to be elected governor. Not much doubt about that. Very impressive win. She's got the money. She's got the backing. It would be shocking if she did not win in November.
And just to think back, that was only 9 months ago or so that Kathy Hochul wasn't really even a household name, and now she certainly is. Talk a little bit about her rise and why you think she's better positioned against Lee Zeldin when Republicans are certainly hoping they can come back to Albany after George Pataki in 2002.
Well, I think obviously her ability to take the reins after Cuomo left were viewed quite impressive. She hasn't made any serious miscues. She seems comfortable in the role. And again, I'd be very surprised if she didn't win comfortably in November.
All right, let's talk about some of the congressional races as well. We had a number of those across the country. And whenever we come into a primary election, we think about how much of a hold does former President Donald Trump have on his party? What kind of influence is he going to have in the primaries? What did you make of those?
Well, I think, Nathan, we're seeing a trend. And excuse my voice, I've got a summer cold. I would say that there's been in the month of June a clear sign that Trump is fading. He's losing altitude. We can talk maybe in a few minutes about the shocking testimony yesterday in Congress, but I'd say the biggest, most interesting election result last night was in Colorado, where a lot of pro-Trump candidates who believe that Trump won continue to insist that Trump won. They lost. And I think that while Trump has won a few races, people who believe that he won, that trend is starting to slip. I think more and more people, not just in Washington, are beginning to realize that this narrative is false.
Yeah, I do want to get your take on the testimony we heard yesterday from Cassidy Hutchinson, the former aide to former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. I imagine it's probably difficult to pick out just one or two moments that stood out from yesterday.
A good point, Nathan. Did he touch the steering wheel of the car? We can talk about that forever. But the fact is, I think that Donald Trump knew there could be violence. He encouraged it. He certainly did not discourage it. And this narrative that based on the lie that he won, leading to a horrible riot and fatalities on Capitol Hill, this is starting to become more generally accepted. And I think that there's no coincidence that all of a sudden Ron DeSantis is the front runner among the Republicans for 2024.
Well, you did mention the sort of doubt cast on that one moment that Hutchinson mentioned about former President Trump potentially lunging from the back seat of the limo. The Secret Service apparently is saying that they're willing to go on the record to give their side of the story. If it is cast into doubt, does that question the credibility overall of Hutchinson's testimony?
It could, but I just think there are too many people now who are convinced that Trump encouraged this, certainly didn't try to stop it. And I think that, again, the details will always be contested, but I think a more general narrative is beginning to take hold.
Greg Valliere, AGF Investments Chief U.S. Policy Strategist. As always, good to get your thoughts on what's happening, not just in the primary races and the testimony of former White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson at the January 6th committee. Greg, thanks for your insights on all that. Looking ahead to the market open, we have S&P futures higher by 3 points. That's a gain of almost 0.1%. Dow futures up 40 points. NASDAQ futures are higher by 9 points after yesterday's drop of 3% for the tech-heavy NASDAQ. The 10-year Treasury right now is up 3/32, the yield 3.16%, and the yield on the 2-year right now close to 3.10%. We'll have much more on the primary results from overnight and getting ready for a very important central bank policy conversation from the ECB Forum in Sintra. This is Bloomberg.
Bay State Business Time is 5:25. It is currently 64 degrees, partly cloudy skies at Logan Airport. A check of traffic and weather straight ahead on Bloomberg 1061 Boston, Newburyport, 92.9 HD2.
Live from Sintra, Portugal, Bloomberg speaks with Jerome Powell.
We're looking for something specific, and that is progress on inflation.
Christine Lagarde.
We are turning our back to negative interest rates.
And Andrew Bailey.
We think there are risks on the upside to inflation.
The Fed Chair, ECB President, and BOE governors sit down with Bloomberg's Francine Lacroix at the ECB Forum on Central Banking. This morning at 9. Only on Bloomberg 1061 and Bloomberg Television.
Hybrid work is here. It's there. It's everywhere. But for someone to be able to work from here, there has to be someone here, making sure everything is safe, secure, consistent. So log in from here or here, assured that someone is here, ready to fix anything, anytime, anywhere, even here. That's because nobody, and I mean nobody, makes hybrid work work better. Cisco, the bridge to possible.
This hotel lobby is full of guests on their phones, but they're not leaving 5-star reviews. They're getting insights from Merrill, a Bank of America company. Like this businessman talking to his Merrill advisor about green energy investments. Now that's hospitality.
Personalized advice so impressive, your money never stops working for you. Visit bankofamerica.com/Merrill Advice.
Sustainable investing involves risk. Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner & Smith Incorporated, registered broker-dealer, registered investment advisor, member SIPC. Bank of America and a member FDIC. Both are wholly owned subsidiaries of Bank of America Corp. Investment products are not FDIC insured or not bank guaranteed, may lose value.
This is Emily Chang, inviting you to join me for Bloomberg Technology, a new daily podcast focusing exclusively on technology, innovation, and the future of business. We'll bring you the latest headlines from Silicon Valley's top companies and conversations with tech's biggest decision makers.
I think guests know Disney's going to do it right.
Building a road to space. Is Uber going to accept crypto in the future? Absolutely.
The Bloomberg Technology Podcast. Subscribe today on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or at Bloomberg.com.
The Bloomberg Crypto Summit is back for its second year on July 19th. 2022 is proving groundbreaking for crypto, coins plummeting, job cuts, liquidity events, and regulations looming. Can confidence be restored? Which crypto projects will survive? Top voices in coins, blockchains, Web3, and investing share what the smart money should know about the next phase of this industry. Founding sponsor Grayscale. Register at bloomberglive.com/crypto/radio.
From the Bloomberg 1061 newsroom in Boston, I'm Tom Maroney.
I'm Joe Shortsleeve. Coming up on Bloomberg Bay State Business starting at 2 p.m. We're going to be talking with Scott Sperling, chairman of the board of Mass General Brigham.
We'll ask how Roe v. Wade impacts their business model and all about that $2 billion expansion.
Bloomberg Bay State Business this afternoon at 2 on Bloomberg 1061 Boston Newburyport and 92.9 HD2. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Bay State Business Time is 5:28. It is time now for a check of traffic. Here's Malcolm Alter. Malcolm.
Thank you, Karen. We're on Route 93 in Braintree. You got a little volume now between the Logan Express lot and the Braintree split. Route 3 looking good. Plymouth to Braintree. Route 24. All lanes are open. Getting by Route 106. That's where a dump truck hit the overpass earlier this morning. On Route 95, you're in good shape from Pawtucket, Rhode Island up into Canton. 128 is in good shape from Canton right up through the Mass Turnpike, which is wide open, Sturbridge into downtown Boston. Leverett Connector Ramp, a little slow getting around the Garden Curve. The Tobin Bridge, Sumner, Callahan, and Ted Williams Fellows not doing too badly. On Route 1, you're in good shape coming out of Newburyport right down through Chelsea. I'm Malcolm Alter with the best ride in and out of the city on Bloomberg 1061 Boston, Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2.
All right, Malcolm, thank you. We're going to have a mostly sunny day ahead. The high temperature right around the mid-80s. And then tonight, could see an isolated shower around, otherwise partly cloudy. Lows dropping to about 65 degrees. Tomorrow, sunny with a high of about 85. Tomorrow night, clear skies, low temperature 65 degrees. And then Friday, a mainly sunny day. Going to be hot, though. The high temperature right in the mid-90s. Currently 64 degrees, partly cloudy skies at Logan Airport. Our top stories straight ahead on Bloomberg 1061 Boston, Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 1061 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
It's 5:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We're just about 4 hours away from the open of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date in the news you need to know at this hour, beginning with primary election results. In New York, Governor Kathy Hochul won the Democratic primary with almost 68% of the vote. She invoked recent Supreme Court rulings in her victory speech.
No matter what the Supreme Court thinks they can do, New Yorkers, you are protected. Protected from concealed weapons. Protected from concealed weapons in our subways, in our schools, and places like this.
And Governor Kathy Hochul defeated Jumaane Williams and Tom Suozzi. Lee Zeldin won the GOP primary for governor with 44% of the vote over Andrew Giuliani, the son of former Mayor Rudy Giuliani.
And some other primaries of note from last night. Republicans in Colorado rejected two candidates aligned with former President Trump. Tina Peters lost to Pam Anderson for Secretary of State. Anderson won with 43% of the vote. And Ron Hanks lost a Senate nomination to Joe O'Dea, who's often acknowledged President Biden won the 2020 election. O'Dea had 54% of votes.
Meantime, Nathan, two hardline conservatives came out winners last night. Lauren Boebert got 65% of the vote in Colorado's 3rd Congressional District. She campaigned on the right to bear arms and disagrees with the separation of church and state. And in Illinois, Republican Mary Miller won her House seat primary with 57% of the vote. She called the Supreme Court's decision on abortion, quote, a historic victory for white life. Her spokesperson said she misspoke.
Turning overseas now, Karen, Finland and Sweden are closer to NATO membership after Turkey agreed to drop objections to the nations joining the alliance. The membership process will still take many months.
In the markets this morning, U.S. futures are little changed, Nathan. This follows yesterday's sell-off, which saw all three major indexes tumble on renewed worries about economic growth. But Wells Fargo equity strategist Anna Hahn says there are still positive signs.
we're not particularly negative on banks or financials, but in general, I think the cyclicality exposure of our portfolio should start picking really where to remove some of that and replace it with things that will have good growth, at least corporate earnings growth.
Wells Fargo's Anna Hans says the economy could still be headed for a mild recession.
And we hear from central bank chiefs later this morning, Karen. Fed Chair Jay Powell, ECB President Christine Lagarde, Bank for International Settlements CEO Augustine Carstens, and Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey speak at the ECB Forum in Portugal with Bloomberg's Francine Lacroix. Catch that interview live right here on Bloomberg Radio and Television at 9 a.m. Wall Street time.
And futures this morning are little change. The 10-year Treasury up 4/30 seconds, yield 3.15%, and the yield on the 2-year 3.09%. Straight ahead, your latest local headlines, plus a check of sports. And this is Bloomberg. Good morning. Bay State Business Time is 5:33. It is currently 64 degrees, partly cloudy skies at Logan Airport. A mostly sunny day is ahead of us. The high temperature pretty pleasant, right around 85. Here are some of the other stories we're following this morning. Well, after the recent Supreme Court ruling overturning the right to abortion, Massachusetts lawmakers are poised to vote today on a reproductive health care bill. And we get more on this story live with Bloomberg's John Tucker. John, good morning.
Aaron, the top Democrats say they're feeling a sense of urgency after the high court ruling. The House yesterday gave initial approval to the 21-page bill. It shields providers of reproductive and gender-affirming care and their patients from out-of-state legal action. And Speaker Ron Mariano says a full vote on the bill is planned for today.
And since the change in Roe versus Wade, we learned that there are loopholes and there are things that need to be fixed. So we want to make sure that we do that.
The new House bill means both branches of the legislature and Governor Baker all have an interest in adopting some sort of expanded liability protections for providers who offer abortions and their patients. But they'll now have to agree on the next exact approach. In the newsroom, I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg, 106.1 Boston Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2.
All right, John, thank you. Well, the Boston School Committee will choose a new school superintendent at its meeting tonight. Somerville School Superintendent Mary Skipper and Boston Region 1 Superintendent Tommy Welch have made it to the final round. The decision comes as the NAACP is calling for a pause in the search process to allow for more diverse candidates. Elementary and Secondary Education Commissioner Jeff Riley earning top marks, the board voting unanimously to rate Riley's work over the most recent school year as a 4.75 out of 5, saying he has done a really admirable job at a very difficult time. Riley was also awarded a 2% salary increase effective July 3rd, which would push his compensation from around $257,000 per year, as reported in state payroll records, to more than $662,000 a year. Bay State Business Time is 5:35. Now let's see what's going on around the world. And here's Michael Barr. Michael.
Karen, a former White House aide, portrayed a violent and out-of-control Donald Trump in his presidency's final weeks before the House January 6th committee. Cassidy Hutchinson testified before Committee Vice Chair Liz Cheney that Trump knew about the various weapons that many of the rioters were carrying, but urged Secret Service officials to remove security apparatus at his rally before the Capitol attack.
I just want to confirm that is when you heard the president say the people with weapons weren't there to hurt him, and that he wanted the Secret Service to remove the magnetometers.
That's correct. In the photos that you displayed, we were standing towards the front of the tent with the TVs, really close to where he would walk out to go onto the stage. These conversations happened 2 to 3 minutes before he took the stage that morning.
Cassidy Hutchinson. The lawyer for Ginny Thomas, the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, says there is no sufficient basis yet for her to testify before the January 6th committee. The attorney for the Thomases says they have been subjected to death threats. Former socialite Ghislaine Maxwell was sentenced to 20 years in prison for her role in helping Jeffrey Epstein sexually abuse underage girls. Michael Barr, Bloomberg 106.1, Boston, Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2. Karen?
All right, Michael Barr, thank you. Well, Boston police have made 4 arrests in the brutal beating of a man outside South Station early Saturday morning. Police say all 4 suspects are juveniles and Boston residents. The teens allegedly beat a 20-year-old man in an attack that was captured on video, leaving the victim with a concussion, a broken nose, and other injuries. Employees at Boston's Museum of Fine Arts ratifying their first labor deal yesterday, becoming the latest prestigious art institution to protect workers with a union contract. The collective bargaining agreement is the first since museum workers voted to join the United Auto Workers Local 2110 10 in November 2020. Uber and Lyft drivers still rallying over their employment status. We get more from Bloomberg's Ann Mostu.
Even after the Supreme Court struck a ballot question about driver employment status, rideshare and delivery drivers who supported the question are holding a rally at the State House today to discuss next steps. Some drivers want to remain independent and set their own hours and schedules, while others want to be full-time employees with benefits. Ann Mostu, Bloomberg 106.1, Boston Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2.
All right, Ann, thank you. Well, a lot of cities in the state are still lacking internet access. We get more from Bloomberg's Ed Corey.
A new report funded by the Massachusetts Competitive Partnership finds large portions of Lawrence and Fall River still lack adequate broadband access. The Globe says the report details how 59% of homes in Chelsea lack adequate broadband, for example, and 56% in Fall River. The numbers are also high in Springfield and Lawrence at 50%, as well as Salem, New Bedford, and Pittsfield. Boston is at 43%. The report cites inadequate wiring inside buildings, too many users on the same connection, or no ability to pay for a high-speed plan. Ed Corey, Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2.
All right, and thank you. Bay State Business Time is 5:38. Time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update with John Stashower. John.
Karen, Red Sox with a back-and-forth game in Toronto. 3-0 Blue Jays in the first inning. They got to Mike Owaka. The Sox came back. Home runs by Trevor Story and Rob Refsnyder. They took a 5-4 lead to the bottom of the ninth. RBI hits by Bo Bichette to tie the game. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. to win it. 6-5. Hansel Robles blew the save. The Sox have been using Taylor out to close. He's not with the team. He's unvaccinated. He was not allowed to make the trip to Toronto. Blue Jays move back into second place by a half game. They are 7-2 on the season versus Boston. NBA free agency begins tomorrow. Free agent list includes Zach LaVine, expected to stay with Chicago. Also Phoenix center DeAndre Ayton, Dallas guard Jalen Brunson. Several reports that he's going to sign with the Knicks, who need a point guard. 34-year-old Will Hardy, who this past season was the top assistant to Celtics coach Ime Udoka, is leaving Boston. He's going to be the new head coach of the Utah Jazz, hired by former Celtics boss Danny Ainge, now running the Jazz. And Hardy will replace Quinn Snyder, who resigns. Serena Williams' return at Wimbledon did not last long, although her first-round match took over 3 hours. She lost the third-set tiebreaker to Harmony Tan. Rafael Nadal won in 4 sets. With Bloomberg 106.1 Sports, I'm John Stashower.
All right, John, thank you. Well, coming up this afternoon, Bay State Business kicks off at 2 p.m. and Bloomberg's Tom Maroney and Joe Shortsleeve are here now to tell us what's in the show. Good morning, guys.
Well, good morning, Karen. On the show today, a very good local guest. Scott Sperling is chairman of the board at Mass General Hospital, also co-CEO of Thomas H. Lee Partners. So, a lot there to talk about, Joe.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about some of the healthcare trends like telehealth and preventative medicine and, of course, breakthroughs in this whole biotech explosion that we're seeing in the city. Never mind our equity markets. Where are we heading? Karen?
All right, Tom and Joe, thank you. That's all coming up today on Bloomberg Bay State Business, heard weekdays from 2 to 5 p.m. right here on Bloomberg 106.1 Boston. Well, demolition of the former Norwood Hospital buildings has begun. The hospital was flooded when 4 inches of rain fell in a 90-minute period in June of 2020. Hospital owner Seward Healthcare indicates that demolition of the destroyed hospital interior began months ago. It's planning to build a new 400,000-square-foot hospital on the site once the demolition is complete. It is currently 64 degrees, partly cloudy skies at Logan Airport, and we have a check of your 3-day forecast, a look at traffic all straight ahead on Bloomberg 106.1 Boston Newburyport and 92.9 HD2.
This Independence Day, the Boston Pops Fireworks Spectacular is back in Boston. Presented by Bloomberg and Eaton Vance. Join conductor Keith Lockhart with special appearances by Shaka Khan, Javier Colon, and Heather Headley. Watch and listen Monday, July 4th, starting at 8 p.m. exclusively on Bloomberg Television, 7 News, and Bloomberg 106.1 Boston Newburyport and 92.9 HD2.
Former New Jersey Governor Tom Kean remains one of the boldest voices on the national stage when it comes to education and the value of public research universities. That's why he's a strong champion for New Jersey Institute of Technology and NJIT's role as an engine for economic growth.
NJIT is the kind of place where you see people coming together, students, professors, state, business. They're coming together to create new technologies. And that's where business is going to combine with industry. That's where a lot of things can happen. It's about science, it's about technology, it's about all these subjects coming together to create the kind of future and create the kind of jobs which this country needs. NJIT, an institution like that, is absolutely essential. I mean, that's where the research is going to be done. That's where these ideas are going to be born. And that's where the discoveries are going to be made.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Jewish Communal Fund board member and Jewish activist Martine Fleischman talks about why the JCF is so important for philanthropists, and especially when contributing to time-sensitive emergency relief.
I chose JCF for my charitable giving because it is a very, very easy way to support the things that I am passionate about. I suggest everyone choose JCF as a donor-advised fund. They are flexible, they are reliable, they get the money to where it's got to go quickly.
During times of crisis, you can count on JCF to get aid to your charities.
We have a special grants fund as part of our endowment that allow JCF to make a $500,000 contribution to the UJ Federation of New York Ukraine Emergency Relief Fund. And I feel very proud of being able to do something like that.
To open a JCF fund, visit jcfny.org or call 212-752-8277. That's 212-752-8277.
You always marveled at the original beauty of a stone wall, and today your landscaping company crafts that same beauty, laying one stone at a time. It's also why you choose Brookline Bank, because with Brookline's more hands-on, personalized style of banking and an array of financial solutions for your business, you have a bank committed to craft better banking, one customer at a time. It's banking well crafted from Brookline Bank, member FDIC.
Bay State Business Time is 5:44. Time now for a check of traffic. Here's Malcolm Alter. Malcolm.
Thank you, Karen. This report is sponsored by Indeed.com. Right now, Route 24, you picked up a little volume between 140 and Route 44. We had that earlier incident much earlier this morning where a truck struck the overpass at Route 106. You've also got delays between 139 and Route 93. 93 will slow you down between the Logan Express slot and the Braintree split. On Route 3, it's a little slow getting into the split as well. The expressway will hang up between Granite Avenue and Columbia Road. Coming up Route 95, a little slow on the ramps, getting onto Route 128, which is wide open from Canton, right up onto the Mass Turnpike. The Pike, wide open, Sturbridge into downtown Boston. The Leverett Connector ramp is carrying a little volume now. The Tobin Bridge will hang up a bit on the Chelsea side, and then again on the Loop ramp. The Sumner and Ted Williams tunnels not doing all that badly. Route 1, you're looking good coming out of Newburyport down into Chelsea. Inbound along the Charles River, Soldiers Field Road, Storrow Drive look good into Leverett Circle. Memorial Drive and Land Boulevard, along with the Fresh Pond and the Alewife Brook Parkways, are doing okay. Mystic Avenue, McGrath and O'Brien Highway, Rutherford Avenue, the Gilmore and Charlestown bridges are all in pretty good shape. The upper end of Route 128 is wide open from Gloucester down through Waltham. If summer is heating up your hiring needs, then you need Indeed. Their all-in-one hiring solution makes it easy to attract, interview, and hire candidates all in one place. Sponsor your first job and get hiring today by visiting Indeed.com/credit. I'm Malcolm Alter with the best ride in and out of the city on Bloomberg, 106.1 Boston, Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2. Karen?
All right, Malcolm, thank you. Now let's get a check of weather, and here's Rob Carolyn. Rob.
Good morning, Karen. As high pressure continues to build our way, nice weather will continue across southern New England. Abundant sunshine today. Our highs between 80 and 85 this afternoon. Tonight, there's the chance of a passing shower. Otherwise, we're partly cloudy. Those will drop down to about 65. Tomorrow, look for sunshine to return. We're back up to about 80 to 85 tomorrow afternoon. Generally clear, low of 65 tomorrow night. And sunny and hot Friday, highs 90 to 95. Drive time, traffic, and weather updates all morning long. I'm Rob Carolyn on Bloomberg, 106.1 Boston, Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2. Karen?
All right, Rob, thank you. 58 degrees in Newburyport, 56 in Weston, and a 61 in Scituate. We have a check of the markets straight ahead on a day when futures are now little changed to lower. This is Bloomberg, 106.1 Boston, Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. European stocks dropping on renewed worries about economic growth as monetary policy tightens in much of the world to fight inflation. U.S. stock index futures are also lower now. They've been jumping around for much of the morning. This after a tech-led slide hurt the S&P 500 yesterday. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are down about 5 points right now. Dow futures, that'll change. NASDAQ futures down 23. The DAX in Germany is down 1.6%. 10-year Treasury up 1/32, yield 3.16%. The yield on the 2-year, 3.10%. NYMEX crude oil is up 1/3% or 40 cents at $112.16 a barrel. COMEX gold down 1/4% or $4.30 at $18.1670 an ounce. The euro 1.0517 against the dollar. British pound 1.2178. The yen 136.30. And looking at Bitcoin, it's down 1% at $20,040. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Thank you very much, Karen. Explosive testimony at yesterday's hearing on the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Former White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson testified that the former president wanted to join the crowd at the Capitol, but was refused by his security detail. NATO leaders are meeting in Madrid amid what Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg calls the most serious security crisis we have faced since the Second World War. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has shattered Europe's peace and driven NATO to pour troops and weapons into Eastern Europe. In baseball, the Yankees beat the A's. The Mets lost along with the Red Sox and Orioles. The Nationals and Giants won. Global news, 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. We're coming up to 5:49 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. Let's get more now on the NATO summit that's now underway in Spain. Sweden and Finland are a big step closer to joining the alliance, and President Biden has announced some major new U.S. commitments to NATO's defense. Joining us live from Madrid, Bloomberg Washington correspondent Anne-Marie Hordern, who is traveling with the president for his meetings with NATO and G7 allies. Anne-Marie, good morning. We know Turkey was opposed to the Swedish position.
Well, interesting, and good morning to you, is that many thought that this would mean concessions, especially from the United States. There's this long-standing request that Erdogan has with Washington for F-16 fighter jets. But a U.S. senior administration official told us getting a bit more comfortable with Finland and Sweden, saying that, he really believes they're going to address these security concerns, of course, including restrictions on Kurdish groups that Turkey has said that they consider terrorists. He also wants them to avoid arms embargoes. So there does seem to be enough between these three to get to an agreement for Turkey to allow the process to continue. Now, we do need to note it will be a few months before Finland and Sweden actually join the group. All 30 members need to sign off on it and has to go through their parliaments. But this is a really strong signal, and it's a win for the president because this was the goal that he wanted out of this week's meeting.
What other goals is the president looking for from this meeting? What other developments are you looking for?
Well, one thing we do know is that the president, along with some other allies, really want to make sure that they're bolstering the force posture on, the eastern flank of NATO. And this morning, the president, standing next to the Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, said that they're going to establish a permanent headquarters in Poland for the 5th Army Corps for the United States. They're also going to be adding additional rotations of thousands of troops in Romania. So they're really bolstering their employment, especially amongst the Baltic states. Other members as well. And of course, the U.S., being a massive driver of NATO, is going to urge others to make sure they're hitting that 2% target in terms of their defense budgets and making sure that is the floor of how much these countries should be spending. The president is really leaning into the fact that this is a critical moment, giving on the EU's doorstep, there is a war.
Obviously, there's a lot more attention now, Anne-Marie, on the threat from Russia with the war underway in Ukraine now into a 5th month. But is there any concern being voiced among NATO leaders that a lot of these developments, whether it's Sweden or Finland potentially bolstering the Eastern Front, or these major increases to troop commitments, could be seen as a provocation by Russia?
Well, that's what many who would be against this would say, that Russia is going to view this as potentially the West even getting involved of what is going on in Ukraine. But for the most part, this is seen and is definitely publicly communicated by NATO members, and especially the Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, that this is a win. President Putin has never liked NATO, and he wanted to weaken NATO. And now what he has is not just a stronger NATO with more defense spending and more U.S. troops on the flank. He also has a bigger NATO with Finland and Sweden now going to be joining this alliance. So I think, if anything, the West sees this as at a time of unity, and that they should be doing this to make sure they are showing a force of strength against the Kremlin.
And to that point, Anne-Marie, it's pretty remarkable just to think about only even a few months ago, there was discussion and a lot of questions about whether NATO was obsolete, whether it was even viable at this point. Now, with the war in Ukraine happening, the dynamic has really shifted in terms of geopolitics.
Yeah, and leaders are saying that NATO has never been more important, or Jens Stoltenberg said it's never been this kind of alliance together. This is the most important we've seen this group since World War II, this sort of Western alliance. So it's an incredibly important moment, this NATO meeting in Madrid. It's an expansion. They're going to discuss how they're going to maintain this unity against President Putin, and how they're going to continue to make sure also how they support Ukraine, because later today, really one of the most important meetings is going to be when leaders from NATO countries are going to be hearing from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky via video conference. It's going to be interesting to what he has to say.
Yeah, I'm going to be listening to that conversation very closely. Anne-Marie Hordern, our Washington correspondent, with us this morning from Madrid for the NATO summit. Anne-Marie, thank you. Karen?
All right, Nathan, now another legal story we're watching. It is 5:54 on Wall Street, and now that the Supreme Court has wiped out the constitutional right to abortion, the battle over abortion shifts to the states. State abortion bans in Texas, Utah, and Louisiana have been blocked temporarily by judges in the state courts, and most challenges focus on provisions in state constitutions. But there may be different outcomes when those cases go up to state Supreme Courts. For more, Bloomberg's June Grasso speaks to Neil Devens, a professor at William and Mary Law School.
So now we have lawyers, trying to dissect state constitutions and statutes to see if they can save abortion rights through state Supreme Courts.
I think state Supreme Courts are very much creatures of the dominant state political culture, as opposed to entities that are going to rule against what lawmakers and voters in the state prefer. So if you look at the states that have the trigger bans, the 13 states that have the trigger laws that are now going into effect, abortion is not politically popular in those states. The state political establishment opposes abortion. These state Supreme Court justices are very much a part of that establishment. They stand for election in most states, not all, but in about 3/4 of the states, and they're subject to popular checks like voter initiatives. And as a result, you rarely see state Supreme Courts playing a sort of path-breaking role. So red states are likely to back red state values, and blue states are likely to back blue state values.
You point to an Iowa Supreme Court decision handed down. Tell us about that.
Iowa is a state that has gone back and forth between Democratic and Republican Party control. So the Iowa Supreme Court, when there was a majority of Democratic Supreme Court justices, found in the state constitution a constitutional right to abortion. The governor and legislature changed, and they no longer were supportive of that decision. So when the Republican political establishment would control the governor's office and the state legislature, they changed this system by which state justices were selected, and several justices' terms were ending. The new Republican governor was able to appoint a majority of justices on the Iowa Supreme Court, and the Iowa Supreme Court followed the lead of the Iowa political establishment and overturned that earlier decision and said that there no longer was a constitutional right to abortion under the Iowa state constitution.
Did Florida's Governor DeSantis do something similar in Florida?
So in Florida, Governor DeSantis also was able to transform the Supreme Court thanks to justices' terms of office ending, he was able to appoint 3 new justices. And the state Supreme Court has already overturned a death penalty decision limiting constitutional protections for those subject to the death penalty. And it's expected that in Florida, where an earlier Supreme Court that was dominated by Democratic appointees had found a constitutional right to abortion, it's anticipated that the new Supreme Court is going to overturn that decision.
And that's Neil Devens, a professor at William & Mary Law School, speaking to Bloomberg's June Grasso. Catch more of that interview, plus analysis of the latest legal news, by subscribing to the Bloomberg Law Podcast or downloading the show at Bloomberg.com/podcast. Attorneys can find exceptional legal research and business development tools at BloombergLaw.com and on the Bloomberg terminal at BLaw Go. And we have our top stories straight ahead as Bloomberg Daybreak continues. This is Bloomberg. Bay State Business Time, 5:58. Time now for a check of traffic. Here's Malcolm Alter. Malcolm.
Thank you, Karen. Right now, coming up Route 24, you've got delays getting through Taunton between 140 and 44, and then again in Avon, right up towards Route 93. 93 will slow you down from the Logan Express slot up into the Braintree Split. On Route 95, you're backed up beyond the Dedham Street overpass. Route 3 will slow you down a bit getting into the Split. On the Southeast Expressway, you've got delays between Granite Avenue and Columbia Road. You're coming down through Andover on Route 93, a little volume between 133 and Dascom Road. 495 will hang up a bit getting onto Route 93. Route 3, minor delays getting down through Chelmsford. On the upper end of Route 128, it's wide open from Gloucester down to Waltham. I'm Malcolm Alter with the best ride in and out of the city on Bloomberg, 106.1 Boston, Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2.
All right, Malcolm, thank you. This traffic update brought to you by Interactive Brokers with margin loan rates from 2.08% to 3.08%, rates subject to change. Learn more at ibkr.com/compare. And we'll have a mostly sunny day ahead. The high temperature is going to be right around the mid-80s. Tonight, maybe an isolated shower, otherwise partly cloudy, a low 65 degrees. Tomorrow, sunny with a high of about 85. Tomorrow night, clear, low temperature, 65 degrees. And then Friday, mostly sunny and hot, the high 95. Top stories straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak on Bloomberg 106.1 Boston.
WRCA Watertown, WBOS HD2 Brookline, WNBP, W291CC, and W221EE Newburyport, W291CC Boston, Bloomberg 106.1.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Wednesday, June 29th, 2022. Coming up this hour.
The latest round of primary results rolls in as the stage gets set for November's election.
Vivid testimony at the January 6 hearings by a former White House aide.
Finland and Sweden move closer to NATO membership.
In local news, the vote expected tonight of the next Boston school superintendent.
Former socialite Ghislaine Maxwell was sentenced involving sexual abuse of girls. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
State lawmakers set to vote on a reproductive health bill. I'm John Tucker. More straight ahead.
I'm John Stashauer in sports. The Red Sox lost in the ninth inning in Toronto. Serena Williams lost at Wimbledon.
The latest news and market-moving headlines from the Bay State and across the globe. It's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak on Bloomberg 106.1 Boston Newburyport and 92.9 HD2, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. stock index futures are extending their losses this morning. We're coming up to 6:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures down 8 points, Dow futures down 30, NASDAQ futures down 38, and the 10-year Treasury down 1/32, yield 3.17%. Yield on the 2-year 3.10%, and NYMEX crude oil is up 0.3%. Nathan.
Karen, we'll have more on the markets in a minute, but first we want to catch you up on some key primary election results from across the country. Let's begin here in New York, where we're joined live by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. In the Democratic gubernatorial primary, it was no contest as Governor Kathy Hochul won going away with almost 68% of the vote. Hochul, during her victory speech, talked about the recent Supreme Court rulings.
Are we going to surrender? Or are we going to fight back? I know what I'm going to do. I'm fighting back. I'm fighting back against that.
Governor Hochul defeated Jumaane Williams, who got 19%, and Tom Suozzi with 13%. Lee Zeldin won the GOP primary for governor with 44% of the vote.
Are we ready to fire Kathy Hochul?
Lee Zeldin beat Andrew Giuliani, the son of former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani, who got 23%. Rob Astorino got 18%, and Harry Wilson received 15%. In New York, I'm Michael Barr, Bloomberg Daybreak. Karen, Nathan?
All right, Michael, thank you. Well, some other key primary results of note. Republicans in Colorado rejected two candidates to align with former President Trump. Tina Peters lost to Pam Anderson for Secretary of State. Anderson had 43% of the vote. Ron Hanks lost a Senate nomination to John O'Day, who has often acknowledged that President Biden won the 2020 election. O'Day had 54% of votes.
Well, meantime, Karen, two hardline conservatives came out winners last night. Lauren Boebert got 65% of the vote in Colorado's 3rd congressional district. She campaigned on the right to bear arms and disagrees with separation of church and state. In Illinois, Republican Mary Miller won her House seat primary with 57% of the vote. Miller called the Supreme Court's decision on abortion, quote, a historic victory for white life. Her spokeswoman says she misspoke.
Well, Nathan, we turn now to the nation's capital, where a former White House aide has given the most dramatic testimony yet to the January 6th House Committee. Cassidy Hutchinson is a former assistant to then White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. She says the former president knew armed people were at his rally. He also demanded Secret Service remove metal detectors, or mags, to let them in.
Something to the effect of, take the effing mags away. They're not here to hurt me. Let them in. Let my people in. They can march to the Capitol after the rally's over. They can march from the ellipse.
And Cassidy Hutchinson says former President Trump wanted to go to the Capitol with the demonstrators. The head of his Secret Service detail, Robert Engel, told him it wasn't safe. That's when Hutchinson says the president lashed out from inside his limo.
The president reached up towards the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel. Mr. Engel grabbed his arm, said, "Sir, you need to take your hand off the steering wheel."
Now, doubt is being cast on that account from Cassidy Hutchinson. In a Truth Social post, former President Trump said it did not happen, and several former aides said it's unlikely he could have reached the steering wheel from the back seat.
Well, we have a major political development overseas this morning, Karen. Finland and Sweden have taken a major step on their way to NATO membership. Let's get more from Bloomberg's Maria Tadeo, who's covering the NATO meeting in Madrid.
It is a huge deal. Erdogan, of course, as you know, yesterday said he would agree to this new membership for Sweden and Finland. So we are going to get 32 members from the 30-member alliance by the end of the summit. And by the way, this should be very easy because a lot of the systems that they use already, they are NATO compatible.
Bloomberg's Maria Tadeo reporting from Madrid says the membership process will still take many months, including ratification from NATO allies' parliaments.
Well, we turn now to the markets, Nathan, where futures here in the U.S. are lower. This follows yesterday's sell-off, which saw all three major indexes tumble on renewed worries about economic growth. The hardest hit was the Nasdaq, falling 3%. The S&P 500 dropped 2%. Victoria Green is Chief Investment Officer at G Squared Private Wealth.
I think we've got a little more to go. Like, we're looking for some confirmation. We're looking for something that makes us feel better about the world. And I think right now we talk about it. It's very kind of simplistic, but don't fight the Fed, and the Fed is hawkish.
And G Squared Private Wealth's Victoria Green notes the latest economic reading sparked yesterday's sell-off. A gauge of U.S. consumer confidence fell to its lowest level in more than a year.
Well, today, Karen, all eyes are on central banks. Fed Chair Jay Powell, ECB President Christine Lagarde, and Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey appear together at the ECB's annual meeting in the Portuguese resort of Sintra. Bloomberg's Francine Lacroix is there and filed this report.
Today, day two, the focus shifts to the broader economy. Participants, including Fed governors, will discuss global supply chain pressures, international trade, and inflation. No matter where you're sitting in the world, inflation is your number one concern. And markets want to know what's the economic price that central bankers are willing to pay to make sure inflation is under control. In Sintra, I'm Francine Lacroix, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Fran, thanks. You'll want to stay tuned for today's big conversation with the biggest names in central banking. Bloomberg's Francine Lacroix speaks with Jay Powell, Christine Lagarde, Andrew Bailey, and Augustine Karstens live right here on Bloomberg Radio and on Bloomberg Television at 9 a.m. Wall Street time.
And in corporate news, Nathan, Tesla has laid off about 200 workers on its autopilot team at a facility in California. Bloomberg News has learned the majority of those let go were hourly workers. And Disney has extended CEO Bob Chapek's contract for 3 years. He's battled controversy and a crippling pandemic. At the same time, Chapek has spearheaded Disney's transformation into a streaming powerhouse. Futures this morning are lower. S&P futures down 5 points. Dow futures down 3, little changed. Nasdaq futures down 27, and the 10-year Treasury little changed. The yield 3.16%. Straight ahead, your latest local headlines, plus a check of sports. And this is Bloomberg. And good morning. Bay State Business Time at 6:07. It is 64 degrees, partly cloudy skies at Logan Airport. We have a pleasant day ahead. There'll be some sunshine, a mostly sunny day. High temperature right around 85. And here are some of the other stories we're following this morning. After the recent Supreme Court ruling overturning the right to abortion, Massachusetts lawmakers are poised to vote today on a reproductive health bill. And we get more this morning from Bloomberg's John Tucker. John, good morning.
And Karen, top Democrats say they are feeling a sense of urgency after the high court ruling. The House yesterday gave initial approval to the 21-page bill shielding providers of reproductive and gender-affirming care and their patients from out-of-state legal action. And Speaker Ron Mariano says a full vote on the bill that is planned for today.
And since the change in Roe versus Wade, we learned that there are loopholes and there are things that need to be fixed. So we want to make sure that we do that.
Well, the new House bill means that both branches of the legislature and Governor Baker all have an interest in adopting some sort of expanded liability protections for providers who offer abortions and their patients. But they'll now need to agree on the exact approach. In the newsroom, I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg 106.1 Boston Newburyport and 92.9 HD2.
All right, John, thank you. Well, the Boston School Committee will choose a new school superintendent at its meeting tonight. Somerville School Superintendent Mary Skipper and Boston Region 1 Superintendent Tommy Welch have made it to the final round. The decision comes as the NAACP is calling for a pause in the search process to allow for more diverse candidates. Elementary and Secondary Education Commissioner Jeff Riley is earning top marks, the board voting unanimously to rate Riley's work over the most recent school year as a 4.75 out of 5, saying he has done a really admirable job at a very difficult time. Riley was also awarded a 2% salary increase effective July 3rd, which would push his compensation from around $257,000 a year, as reported in state payroll records, to more than $262,000 a year. Bay State Business Time is 6:09. Let's see what's going on around the world, and here's Michael Barr. Michael.
Karen, former socialite Ghislaine Maxwell was sentenced to 20 years in prison for her role in helping Jeffrey Epstein sexually abuse underage girls. Prosecutors say Epstein would have been unable to exploit girls as young as 14 without the help of his longtime companion, Maxwell. Meanwhile, R&B star R. Kelly will be sentenced today in Brooklyn. He was convicted of racketeering and accused of sexual misconduct. The Federal Trade Commission alleges Walmart turned a blind eye to scam artists using its MoneyGram money transfer service. The FTC citing witnesses who say the retail giant rarely asked to see IDs of people who were receiving funds through the service. Walmart's called the suit factually flawed and legally baseless. Michael Barr, Bloomberg 106.1 Boston Newburyport and 92.9 HD2. Karen?
All right, Michael, thank you. Well, Boston police have made 4 arrests in the brutal beating of a man outside South Station early Saturday morning. Police say all 4 suspects are juveniles and Boston residents. The teens allegedly beat a 20-year-old man in an attack that was captured on video, leaving the victim with a concussion, a broken nose, and other injuries. The teens are charged as juveniles with assault and battery and larceny. Employees at Boston's Museum of Fine Arts ratifying their first labor deal yesterday, becoming the latest prestigious art institution to protect workers with a union contract. The collective bargaining agreement is the first since museum workers voted to join the United Auto Workers Local 2110 in November 2020. Bay State Business Time coming up to 6:11. Time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update with John Stashower. John.
Karen, the Red Sox trip to Toronto meant any Sox player unvaccinated couldn't go. So no Taylor Houck, who's become the Sox closer. They missed him last night, trying to protect a 1-run lead. Bottom of the 9th inning, they went first to Tyler Danish and then Hansel Robles, who blew a save for the 5th time. The Blue Jays scored twice in the 9th. They won 6-5. Toronto had led 3-0. The Sox had come back, helped by home runs by Trevor Story and Rob Refsnyder. First 2-game losing streak since May. They are just 2-7 versus the Jays this season. In Toronto now back in second place by a half game as they go into another game tonight. NBA free agency begins tomorrow night. We'll see if the Celtics are at all active. Not a huge class of free agents this year, but one name out there is Jalen Brunson. Had a 41-point playoff game for Dallas. Several reports that he is going to sign with the Knicks, where his father was recently named an assistant coach. Serena Williams, now 40 years old. She hadn't played for a year, so not a shock that she was ousted in the first round at Wimbledon. Lost the third set tiebreaker to Harmony Tan of France. Coco Gauff survived. winning 7.5 in the third. Rafael on the Dow won his opening rounder in 4 seconds. With Bloomberg 106.1 Sports, I'm John Stash. Karen.
All right, John, thank you. Well, healthcare giant Bayer, as it's pronounced in Germany and also known as Bayer here in the U.S., has opened a research innovation center in Cambridge, and Bloomberg's Ann Mostu has the details.
It's being called a partnering hub located in Kendall Square that aims to advance the development of new treatments focused on areas of high medical unmet patient need. Bayer has done agricultural work with Boston's Ginkgo Bioworks and has various gene therapy projects in development. Ann Mostu, Bloomberg 106.1, Boston Newbury Report, and 92.9 HD2.
Thanks, Ann. And at Cape Cod Beach closed for a great white shark sighting yesterday afternoon. Headed to Meadow Beach in Truro, off limits for swimming from 1 to 2 p.m. According to the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy, this was the third confirmed shark sighting on a Cape Beach in the last week. Traffic and weather straight ahead on Bloomberg 106.1 Boston.
This is Tom Keene.
I'm Jonathan Farrow.
And I'm Lisa Abramowitz.
Join us later this morning for Bloomberg Surveillance.
At Sintra in Portugal, our friends in Lacroix, in conversation with Jerome Powell, Christine Lagarde, and Andrew Bailey.
And the ambiguity of central banking policy for investors with Aaron Brown of PIMCO.
Bloomberg Surveillance starting at 7 a.m. on Bloomberg 106.1 Boston Newburyport and 92.9 HD2.
And watch us on Bloomberg Television.
Interactive Brokers Global Analyst helps you find new global investment opportunities to diversify your portfolio and discover undervalued companies that may have greater growth potential. IBKR Global Analyst lets you easily compare the relative value of global stocks by region, country, or industry. Find out why smart investors choose Interactive Brokers. Try IBKR Global Analyst today at ibkr.com/GA.
The Bloomberg Crypto Summit is back for its second year on July 19th. 2022 is proving groundbreaking for crypto. Coins plummeting, job cuts, liquidity events, and regulations looming. Can confidence be restored? Which crypto projects will survive? Top voices in coins, blockchains, Web3, and investing share what the smart money should know about the next phase of this industry. Founding sponsor Grayscale. Register at bloomberglive.com/crypto/radio.
Bay State Business Time is 6:14. Time now for a check of traffic. Here's Malcolm Alter. Malcolm.
Thank you, Karen. This report is sponsored by Mako. If you're coming down Route 93 from the north, you've got a minor delay getting through Andover and then again through Woburn and Stoneham. 128, you're looking pretty good. On Route 3, it's a little sluggish getting through Chelmsford and then again approaching Route 128. On the Mass Turnpike, it's wide open. Sturbridge into downtown Boston. The Tobin Bridge will hang up a bit on the Chelsea side, and then on the loop ramp, the Leverett Connector is picking up a little more volume. The Sumner and Ted Williams tunnels not doing all that badly. On the Southeast Expressway, look out for a breakdown right near Furnace Brook Parkway. It's in the breakdown lane, it should be anyway. And then you've got delays Granite Avenue up to Columbia Road. On Route 93, you've got a little volume from the Logan Express slot into the Braintree split. Route 3 looking good, Plymouth to Braintree. Route 24, you've got occasional delays from Brockton right up to Route 93. 95, you're backed up beyond the Dedham Street overpass, getting onto 128, which looks okay from Canton right up through Waltham. Inbound along the Charles River, Soldiers Field Road and Storrow Drive look good into Leverett Circle. Memorial Drive and Land Boulevard, along with the Fresh Pond and the Elbert Brook Parkways, you're doing okay. Coming down Route 495, you're in pretty good shape as well. With Mako and their magic, your car's no longer tragic. If life throws you uh-ohs, just say, better get Mako, and go to Mako.com to book an appointment today. I'm Malcolm Alter with the best ride in and out of the city on Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2. Karen.
Thanks, Malcolm. Now let's get a check of weather, and here's Rob Caroline. Rob.
Karen, we have high pressure over northern New England, a little bit of cloudiness drifting in from the south and west. A mostly sunny day coming up for Boston. Temperatures are going to be somewhere between 80 and 85 this afternoon. Tonight we're partly cloudy. Front crosses northern New England. It may set off a stray shower overnight. Lows near 65. We're back to sunshine tomorrow with temperatures between 80 and 85. Clear 65 tomorrow night. Hot day coming up on Friday. Lots of sun with highs between 90 and 95. Drive time, traffic, and weather updates all morning long. I'm Rob Carolyn on Bloomberg 106.1 Boston Newburyport and 92.9 HD2. Karen?
All right, Rob, thank you. And currently, it is 65 degrees in the Financial District, 62 in Chatham, and it's 60 in Braintree. We have a check of the markets straight ahead on a day when futures are moving lower and NYMEX crude oil is on the rise. And this is Bloomberg 1061 Boston, Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2. Bloomberg Daybreak continues.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. European stocks are dropping on renewed worries about economic growth as monetary policy tightens in much of the world to fight inflation. U.S. stock index futures are also lower this morning after a tech-led slide for the S&P 500 yesterday. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures down about 8 points. Dow futures, they're little change. NASDAQ futures down 36. The DAX in Germany is down 1.7%. It continues to extend its decline. 10-year Treasury up 1/32, yield 3.16%. The yield on the 2-year 3.09%. NYMEX crude oil is up 0.4% or 49 cents at $112.26 a barrel. COMEX gold is down about 0.2% or $2.80 at $18.50 an ounce. The euro 1.0520 against the dollar. British pound 1.2169 and the yen 136.44. Bitcoin this morning lower, down 0.9% at $20,060. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, thank you very much. A former White House aide portrayed a violent and out-of-control Donald Trump in his presidency's final week, saying she was told that he reached for the steering wheel and lunged at a Secret Service agent who tried to stop him from traveling to the Capitol to join last year's insurrectionist mob on January 6th. Meanwhile, in a Truth Social post, former President Trump says it didn't happen. A historic NATO summit is getting underway in Madrid. Finland and Sweden are expected to get their invitations to join the alliance amid Russian aggression. In baseball, the Yankees beat the A's 2-1. The Mets lost along with the Red Sox and Orioles. The Nationals and Giants won. Global news, 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. It is 6:19 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak on a morning where we're awaiting a very important conversation on global monetary policy. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde, and Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey will share a stage later this morning at the ECB Forum on Central Banking in the resort city of Sintra, Portugal. And joining us now is someone else who's going to be on the stage with these policy powerhouses. Francine Lacroix, our very own editor-at-large for Bloomberg News, co-anchor of Bloomberg Surveillance Early Edition on Bloomberg Television. Francine, really appreciate the time because I know you've been very busy with interviews of your own from the ECB Forum, but I'm really curious to get a glimpse, at least, of what's on your question list for Powell and company this morning.
Well, Nathan, I think everything will be dominated, of course, by inflation, and we're really trying to understand what's the economic price that some of these central bankers are willing to pay to make sure that inflation is under control. Now, I just stepped out from a panel on inflation. We had Loretta Mester on that, and she just, she minced no words. She basically said the U.S. Federal Reserve is just at the beginning of raising interest rates to control inflation. And what was extremely interesting for me was she started talking about assumptions on anchored inflation. Now, I had several conversations, for example, with the South African Reserve Bank governor and a couple of ECB Governing Council members on TV earlier, and there's a different perspective if you're in emerging markets. So if you're in emerging markets, you probably would have front-loaded this because you saw inflation coming, you saw a lot of the structural concerns out there, and you would have thought that actually the worst-case scenario is that there's some kind of deflation, right? So they think that dealing with inflation from monetary policy, from central bank's point of view, is easier than dealing with what the Bank of Japan, for example, has been dealing with the last 10 years. But then you listen to Loretta Mester, and she mentioned research saying that it's more costly for policymakers to be wrong about inflation expectations being well anchored when they're not, as opposed to erroneously assuming that they're rising when they're actually well anchored. And I think this goes to the debate around the world
how do we get to a wage spiral? If people read about inflation, if they're worried about their cost of living, they're going to start asking for raises. And this is when central banks could actually lose control.
Yeah, it is very interesting to hear this debate moving forward when it comes to inflation expectations potentially being anchored when we think about the type of inflation that we're seeing in this global economy that's driven not just by the after effects of the pandemic, but now a war in Ukraine and supply chain interruptions as well. And how much control do central banks have over those kinds of factors that are outside monetary supply?
Yeah, and that's $1 million question. I mean, if you look at the current inflation situation, it's definitely very challenging. But again, it's different if you're sitting in the UK. The Bank of England has the added challenge of Brexit. So many people left during COVID. Many people went back home to Europe and have not come back. So it's extremely difficult to fill jobs, which is why a lot of the rise in inflation doesn't only come from airline tickets like we're seeing in Europe, but it comes from people saying, look, you want me to hire me, pay me more. And so that is a challenge that the Bank of England has that the Fed doesn't have. They have a whole other set of problems. Of course, it's different in, where we are in the cycle. There's been this huge stimulus in the U.S., which Europe didn't have, which must contribute also to inflation expectations. And then I was speaking to Adam Posner of the Peterson Institute, and look, he was saying the ECB is probably maybe behind the curve, but their supply shocks are really fueling this inflation. So I remember having conversations with Christine Lagarde last September and October, and they said, yes, there's an inflation problem in the U.S., yes, there's an inflation problem in the U.K., but she didn't see it coming here in Europe. So, maybe it makes it easier because they need to hike less rates, but it also came a bit of a shock because of the war in Ukraine. So, she hadn't preempted that with any hikes at all.
Fascinating. And we're looking forward to many more insights in just about 2.5 hours or so when Francine Lacroix's conversation begins, 9 a.m. Wall Street time, with the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, the president of the European Central Bank, Christine Lagarde, Governor Andrew Bailey of the Bank of England, and Augustine Carstens of the Bank for International Settlements, all joining Francine this morning from the ECB Forum in Sintra. Again, our coverage kicks off 9 a.m. Wall Street time right here on Bloomberg Radio. You can catch it as well on Bloomberg Television. Again, Francine, as always, thanks for the time, and try to get a little rest once all this is over. It has been a very busy ECB Forum in Sintra. Looking ahead to the market open this morning, futures are adding to some of their losses now. We have S&P futures now down 7 points. Dow futures down 19. NASDAQ futures are lower by 36 points. 10-year Treasury is up 1/32. The yield 3.16%. The yield on the 2-year 3.10%. This red headline just crossed the Bloomberg terminal. The UK has sanctioned Vladimir Putin, former first prime minister of Russia, one of the oligarchs. This is Bloomberg.
Bay State Business Time is 6:25. It is 65 degrees, mostly cloudy skies at Logan Airport. Traffic and weather straight ahead on Bloomberg 1061 Boston.
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts. Weekday mornings on Bloomberg 1061.
I'm Paul Sweeney. And I'm Matt Miller. Mark Makepeace, CEO at Wilshire, discusses investing strategies as we head into the second half of the year. Plus, Tracy McMillian of Wells Fargo gives her outlook for the economy.
Bloomberg Markets, today at 10 a.m. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
In the cloud, your data has the power to do the extraordinary. But first, you have to integrate, trust, govern, and manage all of it so you can act on it. Informatica gives you our intelligent data management cloud, the only platform dedicated to managing data is accurate, your insights are actionable, and your possibilities are limitless. Informatica, cloud first, data always. Learn more at informatica.com/radio.
We don't just break news, we build perspective. Bloomberg publishes over 5,000 data-driven stories a day across multiple platforms, so you can gain insight and act with confidence. Ready to think bigger? Start at Bloomberg.com.
Hurry in to Mattress Firm's July 4th sale. Get a king bed for the price of a queen or a queen for a twin and save up to $500 on Sealy. Plus, get a free adjustable base with qualifying Sealy purchase, up to a $499 value. Or shop Tempur-Pedic, the most highly recommended bed in America. and save $500 on all Timber Breeze mattresses and get a $300 instant gift good towards sleep accessories. Only at Mattress Firm. Restrictions apply. See store or mattressfirm.com for details.
If Ernest Hemingway was alive today, would he say this to you?
Shakespeare, Mark Twain, Edgar Allan Poe, all great writers. And after reading your book, I simply must add you to the list.
Wait, you don't have a book yet. So make a free call to Page Publishing. Turn your book idea into publishing gold.
800-215-6818. 800-215-6818. That's 800-215-6818.
Bridgebank helps breakthrough ideas actually break through and remains dedicated to providing financial solutions to the risk takers, the game changers, and the disruptors. Bridgebank, a division of Western Alliance Bank. Bridgebank. Be bold, venture wisely.
Live from Central Portugal, Bloomberg speaks with Jerome Powell.
We're looking for something specific, and that is progress on inflation.
Christine Lagarde.
We are turning our back to negative interest rates.
And Andrew Bailey.
We think there are risks on the upside to inflation.
The Fed Chair, ECB President, and BOE governors sit down with Bloomberg's Francine Lacqua at the ECB Forum on Central Banking. This morning at 9, only on Bloomberg 106.1 and Bloomberg Television.
Bay State Business Time is 6:28. We get a check of traffic now, and here's Malcolm Alter. Malcolm.
Thank you, Karen. On Route 95 in Foxborough, northbound, look out for an accident on the median. It's right near Route 140. On Route 3, you've got a breakdown just after Route 18 in South Weymouth. That's causing some delays. Expressway traffic starts slowing you down around Furnace Brook, where we had an earlier breakdown. It continues sluggish right up to Columbia Road. You're coming down onto the Tobin Bridge on Route 1. Look out for a broken down box truck in the right lane just before the Everett Avenue on-ramp. The lower deck of Route 93 not doing too badly. Leverett Connector has picked up a little volume. Coming down Route 93, you got a little volume getting down through Woburn and Stoneham. I'm Malcolm Alter with the best ride in and out of the city on Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2.
All right, Malcolm, thank you. And this traffic update is brought to you by Interactive Brokers' simple IBKR Global Trader app. Deposit in your local currency and trade stocks in the U.S., Europe, and Asia. Start your free trial at ibkr.com/global trader. Mostly sunny skies today. The high temperature in the mid-80s. Maybe an isolated shower tonight. Otherwise partly cloudy. A low of about 65 degrees. Tomorrow sunny. A high 85. Tomorrow night clear. Low temperature 65 degrees. And then Friday mainly sunny and hot. High 95 degrees. And our top stories are straight ahead on Bloomberg 106.1 Boston.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
6:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We are about 3 hours away from the open of U.S. trading. Time for the 5 things you need to know to start your day. Brought to you by Interactive Brokers. Interactive Brokers Global Analyst helps you find new global investment opportunities to diversify your portfolio and discover undervalued companies that may have greater growth potential. Try IBKR Global Analyst today at ibkr.com/GA. Up first, we take a look at primary election results in New York. Governor Kathy Hochul won the Democratic primary with almost 68% of the vote. She invoked recent Supreme Court rulings in her victory speech.
No matter what the Supreme Court thinks they can do, New Yorkers, you are protected. Protected from concealed weapons. Protected from concealed weapons in our subways, in our schools, and places like this.
Governor Kathy Hochul defeated Jumaane Williams and Tom Suozzi. Lee Zeldin won the GOP primary for governor with 44% of the vote over Andrew Giuliani, the son of former Mayor Rudy Giuliani.
And some other primaries of note last night, Karen. Republicans in Colorado rejected 2 candidates aligned with former President Trump. Tina Peters lost to Pam Anderson for Secretary of State. Anderson had 43% of the vote. Ron Hanks lost a Senate nomination to Joe O'Dea. He's often acknowledged President Biden won in 2020. O'Dea had 54% of votes.
Meantime, Nathan, two hardline conservatives came out winners last night. Lauren Boebert got 65% of the vote in Colorado's 3rd congressional district, and in Illinois, Republican Mary Miller won her House seat primary with 57% of the vote. She called overturning Roe v. Wade, quote, a historic victory for white life. Her spokesperson said she misspoke.
Well, turning overseas, Karen, Finland and Sweden are closer to NATO membership. Turkey agreed to drop its objections to the nations joining the alliance.
Well, in markets, Nathan, U.S. futures are lower this morning. This follows yesterday's sell-off, which saw all three major indexes tumble. But Wells Fargo equity strategist Anna Hahn says there are still positive signs.
We're not particularly negative on banks or financials, but in general, I think the cyclicality exposure of our portfolio, you should start picking really where to remove some of that and replace it with things that will have good growth, at least corporate earnings growth.
Wells Fargo's Anna Hahn said the economy could still be headed for a mild recession.
And later this morning, Karen, Fed Chair Jay Powell, ECB President Christine Lagarde, Bank for International Settlements CEO Augustine Carstens, and Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey speak at the second day of the ECB Forum in Portugal. Bloomberg's Francine Lacroix will interview all four live on Bloomberg Radio and Television at 9 a.m. Wall Street time.
And that's 5 things you need to know to start your day, brought to you by Interactive Brokers. And straight ahead, we have your local headlines, plus a check of sports, and this is Bloomberg. And good morning, Bay State Business Time at 6:33. It is currently 65 degrees, mostly cloudy skies at Logan Airport this morning. We have a mostly sunny day ahead. The high temperature is going to be right around the mid-80s. Here are some of the other stories we've been following this morning. Well, after the recent Supreme Court ruling overturning the right to abortion, Massachusetts lawmakers are poised to vote today on a reproductive health bill. We get more on that story live with Bloomberg's John Tucker. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Top Democrats say they're feeling a sense of urgency after the high court ruling. The House yesterday giving initial approval to the 21-page bill that shields providers of reproductive and gender-affirming care and their patients from out-of-state legal action. Speaker Rod Mariano says a full vote on the bill is planned for today.
And since the change in Roe versus Wade, we learned that there are loopholes and there are things that need to be fixed. So we want to make sure that we do that.
Well, the new House bill means both branches of the legislature and Governor Charlie Baker all have an interest in adopting some sort of expanded liability protections for providers who offer abortions and their patients. But they will now need to agree on the exact approach. In the newsroom, I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg, 106.1 Boston Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2. Karen.
All right, John, thank you. Well, the Boston School Committee will choose a new school superintendent at its meeting tonight. Somerville School Superintendent Mary Skipper and Boston Region 1 Superintendent Tommy Welch have made it to the final round. The decision comes as the NAACP is calling for a pause in the search process to allow for more diverse candidates. Elementary and Secondary Education Commissioner Jeff Riley earning top marks, the board voting unanimously to rate Riley's work over the most recent school year as a 4.75 out of 5. Riley was also awarded a 2% salary increase effective July 3rd, which would push his compensation from around $257,000 a year, as reported in state payroll records, to more than $262,000 a year. Bay State Business Time is 6:35. Now let's see what's going on around the world, and here's Michael Barr. Michael.
Karen, a former White House aide portrayed a violent and out-of-control Donald Trump in his presidency's final weeks before the House January 6th committee. Cassidy Hutchinson testified before committee Vice Chair Liz Cheney that Trump knew about the various weapons that many of the rioters were carrying, but urged Secret Service officials to remove security apparatus at his rally before the Capitol attack.
I just want to confirm that is when you heard the president say the people with weapons weren't there to hurt him and that he wanted the Secret Service to remove the magnetometers.
That's correct. In the photos that you displayed, we were standing towards the front of the tent with the TVs, really close to where he would walk out to go onto the stage. These conversations happened 2 to 3 minutes before he took the stage that morning.
Cassidy Hutchinson, the lawyer for Ginny Thomas, the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, says there is no sufficient basis yet for her to testify before the January 6th committee. The attorney for the Thomases says they have been subjected to death threats. Former socialite Ghislaine Maxwell was sentenced to 20 years in prison for her role in helping Jeffrey Epstein sexually abuse underage girls. Michael Barr, Bloomberg 106.1 Boston Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2. Karen?
All right. Thank you, Michael Barr. Well, flight delays and cancellations are easing at Logan Airport this morning, with 16 flights canceled so far and 22 delayed. Tomorrow, or yesterday rather, there were 29 flights canceled and 191 delayed. Boston police have made 4 arrests in the brutal beating of a man outside South Station early Saturday morning. Police say all 4 suspects are juveniles and Boston residents. The teens allegedly beat a 20-year-old man in an attack that was captured on video, leaving the victim with a concussion, a broken nose, and other injuries. The teens are charged as juveniles with assault and battery and larceny. Employees at Boston's Museum of Fine Arts ratifying their first labor deal yesterday, becoming the latest prestigious art institution to protect workers with a union contract. The collective bargaining agreement is the first since museum workers voted to join the United Auto Workers Local 2110 in November 2020. Uber and Lyft drivers are still rallying over their employment status. And we get more from Bloomberg's Ann Mostu.
Even after the Supreme Court struck a ballot question about driver employment status, rideshare and delivery drivers who supported the question are holding a rally at the State House today to discuss next steps. Some drivers want to remain independent and set their own hours and schedules, while others want to be full-time employees with benefits. Ann Mostu, Bloomberg 106.1, Boston Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2.
All right, Ann, thank you. The Mass High Tech Council just held a summit on the need for local companies to shore up their cybersecurity defenses. And we get more from Bloomberg's Janet Wu.
Cyber attacks, particularly ransomware, continue to spike. Corey Thomas, CEO of Boston-based cybersecurity firm Rapid7, says defense starts with the culture of every company.
It's something that's a permanent part of the way that we work and the way that we get work done. And I would say the cultural thing is the thing that's most likely to give you the best level of security.
He was joined by executives from McKinsey, MITRE, and other companies addressing the need for more cyber resiliency. Janet Wu, Bloomberg 106.1, Boston Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2.
All right, Janet, thank you. Well, the stock of Boston Beer has received its 3rd downgrade in the past week, and we want to get more on that story from Bloomberg's Steve Potus.
It's enough to make your suds go flat. A growing chorus of analysts expect the maker of Samuel Adams Beer and Truly Hard Seltzer to lower its fiscal 2022 guidance. Goldman Sachs downgraded the stock to a sell from neutral as the demand for hard seltzers continues to peter out. The recent cut follows downgrades at UBS and Bernstein last week. Boston Beer is expected to report second quarter results on July 21st. The company's stock has slid 69% over the past 12 months. Steve Potusk, Bloomberg 106.1, Boston, Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2.
All right, Steve, thank you. And Bay State Business Time is 6:39. Time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update with John Stashower. John.
Karen, Red Sox with a back-and-forth game in Toronto. 3-0 Blue Jays in the first inning. They got to Micah Wacha. The Sox came back. Home runs by Trevor Story and Rob Refsnyder. They took a 5-4 lead to the bottom of the ninth. RBI hits by Bo Bichette to tie the game. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. to win it. 6-5. Hansel Robles blew the save. The Sox have been using Taylor Houck to close. He's not with the team. He's unvaccinated. He was not allowed to make the trip to Toronto. Blue Jays move back into second place by a half game. They are 7-2 on the season versus Boston. NBA free agency begins tomorrow. Free agent list includes Zach LaVine, expected to stay with Chicago. Also Phoenix center DeAndre Ayton. Dallas guard Jalen Brunson. Several reports that he's going to sign with the Knicks, who need a point guard. 34-year-old Will Hardy, who this past season was the top assistant to Celtics coach Ime Udoka, is leaving Boston. He's going to be the new head coach of the Utah Jazz, hired by former Celtics boss Danny Ainge, now running the Jazz. And Hardy will replace Quinn Snyder, who resigns. Serena Williams' return at Wimbledon did not last long, although her first-round match took over 3 hours. She lost the third-set tiebreaker to Harmony Khan. Rafael Nadal won in 4 sets. The Bloomberg 106.1 Sports. I'm John Stashower. Okay?
All right, John, thank you. Well, coming up this afternoon, Bay State Business kicks off at 2 p.m. and Bloomberg's Tom Maroney and Joe Shortsleeve are here now to tell us what's on the show. Good morning, guys.
Well, good morning, Karen. On the show today, a very good local guest. Scott Sperling is chairman of the board at Mass General Hospital, also co-CEO of Thomas H. Lee Partners. So lot there to talk about, Joe.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about some of the healthcare trends like telehealth and preventative medicine and, of course, breakthroughs in this whole biotech explosion that we're seeing in the city. Never mind our equity markets. Where are we heading? Karen?
All right, Joe and Tom, thank you. That's all coming up today on Bloomberg Bay State Business, 2 to 5 p.m. here on Bloomberg 1061 Boston. Other stories we're following: Rhode Island Governor Dan McKee signing the Plastic Waste Reduction Act. Rhode Island retail establishments will be prohibited from making any single-use plastic bag available to customers. Paper checkout bags must be recyclable. A Cape Cod beach closed for a great white shark sighting yesterday afternoon. Headed the Meadow Beach in Truro off limits for swimming from 1 to 2 p.m. According to the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy, this was the third confirmed shark sighting on a Cape beach in the last week. Currently 65 degrees, mostly cloudy skies at Logan. Traffic and weather straight ahead on Bloomberg 1061 Boston.
This is Tom Keene.
I'm Jonathan Ferro.
And I'm Lisa Abramowitz.
Join us later this morning for Bloomberg Surveillance.
At Sintra in Portugal, our Francine Lacroix in conversation with Jerome Powell, Christine Lagarde, and Andrew Bailey.
And the ambiguity of central banking policy for investors with Aaron Brown of PIMCO.
Bloomberg Surveillance starting at 7 a.m. on Bloomberg 1061 Boston Newburyport and 92.9 HD2.
And watch us on Bloomberg Television.
Yeah, I'm so stressed. Our business is growing. We've got people all over now.
Ooma.
What is that? Meditation?
I'm recommending Ooma and their all-in-one phone, video, and collaboration solution.
Ooma?
Yep. Switching to Ooma is a cinch. Just $24.95 per month per user, plus taxes and fees.
Ooma.
Now you're feeling it. Visit Ooma.com. That's OOMA.com to learn more. Ooma. Smart communications for the smarter business.
Why choose proven quality sleep from Sleep Number? Because our Sleep Number 360 smart bed is really smart. It senses your movement and automatically adjusts to help keep you both comfortable. Plus, it's temperature balancing so you stay cool. It's even smart enough to know exactly how long, how well, and when you slept. And to help you get almost 30 minutes more restful sleep per night. Sleep Number takes care of the science. All you have to do is sleep. Don't miss our 4th of July special. The Queen Sleep Number 360 C2 smart bed is only $8.99. Plus free home delivery when you add a base. Ends Monday. To learn more, go to sleepnumber.com.
This Independence Day, the Boston Pops Fireworks Spectacular is back in Boston. Presented by Bloomberg and Eaton Vance. Join conductor Keith Lockhart with special appearances by Shaka Khan, Javier Colon, and Heather Headley. Watch and listen Monday, July 4th, starting at 8 p.m. exclusively on Bloomberg Television, 7 News, and Bloomberg 1061 Boston Newburyport and 92.9 HD2.
Bay State Business Time at 6:44. Time now for a check of traffic, and here's Malcolm Alter. Malcolm.
Thank you, Karen. This report is sponsored by Staples Stores. Coming down Route 3 from Chelmsford, you've got a little volume down through Billerica, and then again approaching Route 128, where you've got a little volume through the Linfield-Wakefield area down to Route 93. 93 will slow you down coming out of Wilmington right down past Route 128, and then again from around the Mystic Valley Parkway the rest of the way into downtown Boston. The Tobin Bridge, look out for a broken-down box truck right near the Everett Avenue on-ramp. You've got delays getting through there in Chelsea, and then again on the loop ramp. The Sumner and Ted Williams tunnels pick up a little volume as well. On the Mass Turnpike, it's a little sluggish getting through Framingham and Natick, and then again through the Newton area, and getting word of an accident in Hopkinton. On the Southeast Expressway, it's slow from Furnace-Brook Parkway up to Columbia Road. Route 3, look out for a breakdown by Route 18 in South Weymouth. You've got delays starting around Derby Street, and it continues sluggish right up to about Union Street. On Route 95, they're clearing an accident off the median near Route 140 in Foxborough. It's got traffic backing up beyond 495. You're hung up again around the Dedham Street overpass, getting up onto 128, which is a little slow, getting up by Route 1 to 109. Staples is a one-stop shipping solution for small business with packing and shipping supplies and services. Right now, get 20% off UPS Express shipping services. Offer N72. Visit staplesconnect.com/services/shipping for details. If you need to ship at Staples, the working and learning store. I'm Malcolm Alter with the best ride in and out of the city on Bloomberg 1061 Boston, Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2. Karen?
Right, Malcolm, thank you. Now let's get a check of weather, and here's Rob Carolyn. Rob.
Karen, we have high pressure and control of the weather across New England today. We've got some patchy cloudiness showing up on the satellite photos, but all in all, we should be mostly sunny with temperatures between 80 and 85 this afternoon. Tonight, we're partly cloudy. A front sweeps across northern New England. That may set off a stray shower overnight. Those will be near 65. Sunshine returns during the day tomorrow with a new area of high pressure, 80 to 85. Clear 65 tomorrow night, then sunny and hot Friday, 90 to 95. Drive time, traffic, and weather updates all morning long. I'm Rob Carrollton on Bloomberg 106.1 Boston Newburyport and 92.9 HD2. Karen?
Right, Rob, thank you. Currently 66 degrees in the Seaport. It is 61 in Orleans and it's 61 in Salem. And we have a check of the markets straight ahead on a day when futures are moving lower. And this is Bloomberg 106.1 Boston Newburyport and 92.9 HD2.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. stock index futures are moving lower this morning following yesterday's sell-off. And we go to the first word breaking news desk for today's morning call. Here's Bill Maloney. Bill, good morning.
And good morning, Karen. That's right. Modest losses in the U.S. futures right now. Dow futures down 34 points. S&P's drop 11, while NASDAQ futures are off by 50. The U.S. 10-year yield at 3.16%. Gold is little changed. Oil trading higher, and Bitcoin is lower by 1%. Shanghai dropped 1.4% overnight, while European markets are firmly in the red this morning, led by 2% losses in Germany. Back in the U.S. on the economic front at 8:30, U.S. Q1 GDP. And after the bell last night, Disney extended the contract of CEO Bob Chapek for 3 years. Regarding earnings this morning, McCormick missed estimates. Also look for General Mills and Paychex to report in the pre-market. In other news, Mester says the Fed is just at the beginning of raising U.S. rates, and J.P. Morgan cut earnings estimates across the board in big tech stocks. Wrapping things up, Altria was cut to underweight at Barclays. T. Rowe Price cut to underperform over at KBW. Live from the first breaking news desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Karen?
All right, Bill, thank you. To hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg, type squawk on your terminal, SQUAWK. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, thank you very much. Explosive testimony at yesterday's hearing on the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Former White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson testified that the former president wanted to join the crowd at the Capitol but was refused by his security detail. NATO leaders are meeting in Madrid amid what Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg calls the most serious security crisis we faced since the Second World War. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has shattered Europe's peace and driven NATO to pour troops and weapons into Eastern Europe. In baseball, the Yankees beat the A's 2-1. The Mets lost along with the Red Sox and Orioles. The Nationals and Giants won. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Karen.
All right, Michael, thank you. 6:49 on Wall Street. We turn to news and science and technology now with a Bloomberg NJIT STEM report brought to you by New Jersey Institute of Technology. NJIT is dedicated to bolstering support for female and minority students pursuing careers in high-paying STEM industries. Learn more at njit.edu. And now here's what's making news in science, technology, engineering, and math. U.S. regulatory advisors say COVID shots from Pfizer and Moderna should be updated to include components that target the highly transmissible Omicron variant. That's the version of the virus that causes most of the world's cases. Members of the panel that advised the FDA voted 19-2 Tuesday in favor of recommending adding an Omicron-specific element to the shots. The FDA does not have to follow the recommendations, but it usually does. Chinese President Xi Jinping said the COVID-0 policy is the most economic and effective for China, and the country is capable of achieving the goal of stamping out infection. He made the comments, reported by state media, on a visit to Wuhan, the city where the virus first emerged in late 2019. And the European Union is effectively heralding the end of the era of internal combustion engines. EU members have endorsed a push to eliminate carbon emissions from new cars by 2035. Environment ministers struck a deal after Italy, the home of Ferrari and Lamborghini supercars, gave up demands for a 5-year delay. And that's a Bloomberg NJIT STEM report. Nathan.
All right, Karen, thank you. We are live from the Bloomberg Interactive
Broker Studios, where it's almost 6:51 on Wall Street. Now it's time to check what's going on in D.C. Some of the top stories in our nation's capital include that vivid testimony from a former White House aide about former President Trump's rage on January 6th. Ginny Thomas, the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, declining to testify before the House January 6th panel. And primary elections attested former President Trump's hold on the GOP and abortion rights as an issue for primary voters. Bloomberg government reporter Emily Wilkins joins us live this morning after the surprise hearing on Capitol Hill. Emily, it might be a little bit tough to pick out even one or two portions of Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony that stood out. There was a lot that she had to say.
It was, Nathan, and it was, I think, really the first time that we've heard in vivid detail a TikTok of what Trump did, said, and how he behaved on January 6th from someone who was very close to the president, both in terms of proximity and simply in terms of being in the room frequently with his chief of staff, Mark Meadows. One of the big things that we heard yesterday was that Trump, when he initially spoke at the rally that was closer to the White House than the Capitol, he was told that a number of people in the crowd had weapons. And Trump asked that the magnetometers be taken down, that the folks with weapons be led into the rally space, saying, quote, "They're not here to hurt me." And of course, that was a very, very impactful testimony. There's also, Hutchinson also said at this point that there was a time where when Trump was told he wasn't taken to the when he didn't want to go to the Capitol, when the Secret Service rather would not take him to the Capitol, that he actually lunged for the steering wheel of the vehicle, tried to push past the Secret Service agents. Although at this point, we are now hearing from the Secret Service and we're hearing reporting saying that these agents are refuting that account. So I think there's a lot of questions right now about exactly what's going to happen with this testimony. I think for some people, they're hearing other individuals push back, but of course, no one at this point has said they're going to swear an oath, sit down with the committee and say it on the record. And certainly yesterday's hearing ended with the chairman, Benny Thompson, inviting anyone who did have more information for the committee to come forward.
Now, we've heard some reaction as well from former President Trump. He posted quite a bit on his Truth Social platform saying that he denies that he lunged at the Secret Service agent from the limo. He says that Cassidy Hutchinson is a disgruntled former employee who applied for a job in Florida and was turned down. What could that potentially mean in terms of her credibility, her testimony being seen by voters?
Well, I don't think it's very surprising that Trump and his allies are trying to discredit and downplay this testimony. Certainly, they know that these January 6 hearings have had a big impact. We have reporting that Trump has been watching the hearings. And just to be clear, it was Bloomberg that actually reported that Casey Hutchinson was one of several White House aides who are hoping to go to Mar-a-Lago with Trump. So that is our own reporting from our White House, really award-winning, fantastic White House team. And I think it just sort of adds a question mark into it. But at the same point, it was such a vivid testimony. And it was such great detail. And it's been a part of these very well orchestrated hearings that have very much had a mind to ensuring that Americans really have the full narrative of what happened, not just on January 6th, but in the days leading up to it. So I think we're going to still see how it shakes out. Obviously, we have more hearings, at least 2 coming in July. And then we have the committee's report. And the committee, if you'll remember, they were going to meet more this week, but they pushed it back because they were getting more new information. So we'll see what other twists and turns are ahead as more people speak to the committee and they continue their work.
Now, we did have one other twist and turn overnight when we got late word that Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas's wife, Ginny, is declining an invitation to testify before the committee.
Right. And remember, that request came after email surfaced from Trump's lawyer, John Eastman, and Ginny Thomas discussing efforts to potentially overturn the election. This is, of course, more extensive than we previously knew about Ginny Thomas's involvement. We knew that she had been texting Chief of Staff Mark Meadows about it. And initially, Thomas had suggested that she would be willing to testify in front of the committee. But we got a letter from her lawyer last night saying that there's not enough reason for the committee to speak with her at this point, and there isn't a sufficient basis for them to speak with Ginny Thomas. Of course, we'll see what could happen next. The committee does have other steps they could take to try and compel someone to speak with them, but often that can lead to a lengthy legal process in the courts.
Only about a minute left here, Emily, but what stands out to you from last night's primary results?
So I think this was a really good night. If you are Trump, a number of his candidates who have been backed won major primaries in Illinois. I think is one of the big states you saw there for the governor's race. Trump's backed candidate beat out a more well-known, better funded Republican in that primary, and also in a Illinois House race that pitted two sitting Republicans of Congress against each other. The Trump-backed candidate beat sort of the more established, slightly more mainstream candidate.
Bloomberg government reporter Emily Wilkins, as always, thanks for keeping us up to speed on what's happening in D.C. Read more about all these stories on Bloomberg.com or on the Bloomberg terminal, and you can follow all the latest on Bloomberg Radio in Washington, Bloomberg 99.1 and 105.7 FM HD2. Looking ahead to the market open, futures are pointing to slightly more losses after the sell-off yesterday. We have S&P futures down now 8 points, Dow futures down 29, NASDAQ futures are lower by 38 points. Looking at the bonds, the 10-year Treasury is up 3/30 seconds, the yield 3.16%, and the yield on the 2-year right now 3.09%. NYMEX crude is up 0.8% or 86 cents at $112.62 a barrel. Of course, we're looking forward to that ECB forum conversation. 9 a.m. Wall Street time. Francine Lacroix sits down with Fed Chair Jay Powell, ECB President Christine Lagarde, and Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey. That kicks off at 9 a.m. Wall Street time. Bloomberg Surveillance is next. This is Bloomberg.
Bay State Business Time is 6:58. Time now for a check of traffic, and here's Malcolm Alter. Malcolm.
Thank you, Karen. If you're heading eastbound on the Mass Turnpike in Hopkinton, look out for an accident in the breakdown lane. It's just after Route 495, and then you've got occasional delays getting through Framingham and Newton. On Route 3 in the South Shore, you've got slow traffic a little bit after Route 228. We had an earlier breakdown up by Route 18 in South Weymouth. Expressway traffic will slow you down from East Milton Square up to Columbia Road. On Route 95 in Foxborough, they're clearing an accident scene off the median near Route 140. I'm Malcolm Alter with the best ride in and out of the city on Bloomberg, 106.1 Boston, Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2.
All right, Malcolm, thank you. We have mostly sunny skies today. The high temperature right around the mid-80s. And tonight, maybe an isolated shower. Otherwise, partly cloudy, low dropping to 65 degrees. Tomorrow, sunny, a high about 85 degrees. And tomorrow night, clear skies, lows dropping to the mid-60s. Friday, mainly sunny and hot. The high temperature is going to be right around 95 degrees. Currently, it is 65 degrees, mostly cloudy skies at Logan Airport. And Bloomberg.
WBOS HD2 Brookline, WNBP, W291CC, and W221EE Newburyport, W291CC Boston, Bloomberg 106.1.
Data, analytics, technology, connected. Bloomberg's enterprise solutions integrate systems and workflows across your firm so you can increase transparency.
This is a Volcker-esque type of Fed where they are clearly focused on getting inflation down.
Core inflation, food, energy, that whole thing is no longer transitory. It's very sticky, and they're worried.
There has been some signs that the economy is losing a little momentum.
We actually think there's a 50-50 chance of recession in the next 12 months.
If there's a recession, it's not going to be a massive recession.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrow, and Lisa Abramowitz.
A lot to look forward to this morning from New York City for our audience worldwide. Good morning, good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on TV and radio alongside Tom Keene and Lisa Abramowitz. I'm Jonathan Ferro. Futures down about 0.2%. TK, we're about an hour away, 2 hours away from the central bankers in Sintra, Portugal.
A lot of moving targets here, John, and very different stories from each of them. I think they will finesse to what they do not say. And I would say more than anything, particularly looking at the currency and what we'll see with Euro Swissy here on the data check, is they're looking at foreign exchange as a litmus paper of an uncoordinated central bank system.
And looking at economic data, Tom, that's starting to weaken. Stateside, we saw it in the Dallas Fed manufacturing, the Richmond Fed manufacturing, the consumer confidence data too. We saw it in the PMIs last week.
Yeah, sterling gives way 121.59. I think that's a change overnight. And what I'm really watching is yen now up to 136.54. A 137 yen, John, would speak volumes to those Western central bankers.
Bramo, at this point, what we're all waiting for now is not just the economic data, but the earnings and the company-specific stories that we're set to hear from the JP Morgans of this world from, say, July 14th, when earnings season really kicks into a high gear.
And to put that July 14th into some perspective, giving you a sense of how much capital markets have slowed down, U.S. IPO volume so far this year accounts for less than 6% of what we saw in the first half of 2021. Similar story in the U.S. high-yield bond space. Capital markets have all but completely halted. How does that really speak to this lack of conviction and a lack of, frankly, forward guidance that we get from some of these earnings?
Okay, but let's compare the capital market activity that we're seeing now to what we saw at the end of 2018. Is there any comparison yet, Lisa? Are you seeing that kind of level of stress?
Actually, if you take a look, for example, at U.S. high-yield bond issuance, it's $70 billion. That's nothing compared to what it has been over recent years.
Better than zero, though.
It's better than zero. This is not ground to a halt. But given how quickly rates have been rising, there is a fear, right, that if this continues for a year, 2 years, how do companies that finance themselves at 5% rates go to 11%? 12%. And that is a very real possibility. And suddenly people are thinking, how long can this possibly go on? And how can the Fed really get ahead of that?
520 on high yield spreads, and they've stayed wide. They've stayed elevated. They just haven't come in the way that, say, equities have rallied over the last couple of weeks. We'll pick up on that with Stuart Kaiser at UBS in just a moment. Equities look like this. We're down about 1/3 of 1% on the S&P, on the Nasdaq 100, negative around about 1/3 of 1% too. 2 hours away from Chairman Powell, President Lagarde and Governor Bailey sitting down with Francine Lacqua. Looking forward to that a little bit later this morning. Yields coming in about a basis point to 315.84 on a 10-year. Euro dollar just really not giving me much this morning. Lisa, Tom looking at Euro Swissy, Euro dollar 105.24 and unchanged on the day.
Yeah, very much looking forward to that panel. Before we get there, we do see all of the leaders of the NATO members, the NATO nations, going to Madrid for the NATO summit. We're going to hear from Jens Stoltenberg later this morning, 7:45, as well as in the 11 o'clock hour. Joe Biden also going to be there. 9 a.m., very interested to hear this panel. It is the moment of the day. It includes ECB President Christine Lagarde, Fed Chair Jay Powell, Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey, as well as the Bank of International Settlements head Augustin Carstens, of course, moderated by our own Francine Lacqua. How much do they speak about the need to get ahead of inflation over the longer term, no matter what? How much do they speak to the prioritization of continuing to go at rate hikes, regardless of the data? This, to me, is one of the key questions at a time when people are getting increasingly concerned about inflation expectations becoming unmoored. And at 10:30 a.m., the latest read on the crude market, EIA crude oil inventory reports. This comes after we got some indications yesterday that inventories still were not building in the gasoline front, and it comes as diesel rates still remain at record highs in the United States, really pressuring everything and being an inflationary input, John, not only to people driving around, but also to companies that need to transport those items.
Bramo, thank you. That's where some of the inflation has been coming from, that's for sure. Joining us now in the studio, I'm pleased to say, is Stuart Kaiser, the head of equity derivatives research at UBS. Stuart, let's start here. This was the move you've been waiting for. We bottomed on the Nasdaq on about June 16th. We bounced quite aggressively off it. You've seen that at the single name level as well on some big tech cap stocks, big mega cap stocks as well. Can you walk me through on whether we've seen the move, whether you think it's more durable, it's got legs, and ultimately why?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jonathan. We did get a bounce off the bottom. You could argue whether that's, positioning based or actual data that's coming in. I think to make it sustainable, you're going to need to see a little bit of follow through in the inflation data, over the next couple of weeks. We get PCE on the 29th, and then you get CPI next month. So I think that's going to be going to be the number one driver. I mean, if you really look what's happened to equity markets since late March, really, is you've had a significant decline in inflation expectations. But on the other side, you've had real rates higher and more restrictive, and you've had growth expectations kind of coming down a lot. And that sort of, back and forth between inflation and growth data has really challenged things. So I think what the market's looking for here is for inflation to stabilize a bit, and hopefully that allows, less restrictive policy to be priced into the system, which kind of takes down recession risks and on. And ultimately, that's what you need for this to be more sustainable.
Stuart, as my parents taught me about foreign exchange, I was a kid and I would kill to have it. I've lost it. I had a passbook from the Union Bank of Switzerland and made money on strong Swiss franc. That was a few years ago, like 54 years ago. This is an historic moment right now. I certainly don't want you to speak for UBS on the politics of Switzerland, but I'm going to go Thatcher on you. Expect the unexpected. We are seeing shifts here. As one example, a national bank with 71 million shares of Apple going to parity moments ago on Euro Swissy. These tectonic forces that we're seeing now are extraordinary. How do you fold them into an equity belief?
Yeah, look, and that's a huge challenge to the markets. I think you're seeing that through interest rate volatility mainly. But, coming into the year, that was the issue. You had obviously decelerating growth and rising inflation, but you had a policy regime shift. And that policy regime shift was clearly going to create macro volatility. We've seen that in equities with the VIX averaging over 26 for the year. You've seen it in FX volatility and high yield volatility. So I think to me, how that's translated through to equity markets is we're not really sure where home base is, right? The risk-free rate has been so volatile. FX has been so volatile that it's hard to have a view on risk assets if risk-free assets are volatile.
You lose money.
Do you assume you lose money?
Do you assume you lose money given what you just said about volatility?
Look, I don't think you assume you lose money. I think you assume that your risk-adjusted returns are structurally lower than they have been the last couple of years. And what that's done to institutional investors is it's forced them to reduce the size of positions. As Lisa commented before, that takes down liquidity in terms of tradable assets, and that creates more volatility, which kind of, portends weaker risk-adjusted returns. So, I mean, I don't think you assume you lose money on a nominal basis, but your risk-adjusted view on that, I think, is just impeded pretty seriously.
Stuart, we started the show talking about how the Fed is just the beginning of rate hikes, and that is from Loretta Mester, and it's also from the fact that they really haven't raised rates nearly as much as they're expected to do so. Has the market truly priced in a scenario where the Fed funds rate, as she says, is going to be at 4% by early next year, or are people retracing too much in this belief that the Fed will really ease off in the face of weakening economic data?
Lisa, I think you have to assume that was priced into the forwards and the rates market is accurately reflected in equities, with some risk premium to it. I think to your point, though, equity markets and investors in general, I think are probably hoping that, the Fed is being very aggressive to front load rate hikes. And as you mentioned before, to really talk inflation expectations and to keep those anchored. So I think you have sort of a front loaded rate hiking cycle. You have an effort to keep expectations anchored. And, I think probably in the back of their minds, some investors are hoping that once that happens and once inflation gets a little bit more under control, then they can ease up with a little bit of that rhetoric as the year goes on. But look, I think if it's priced into the bond markets, I think you have to assume that it's largely, priced into the equity markets at this point.
Stuart, do you assume then that the leadership comes from where the leadership was in a previous decade and that ultimately not much has changed? Is that your working assumption at the moment?
Look, I think, for the second half of this year, I think our view is the things that have been hurt the most by higher inflation and higher rates are ultimately going to recover a little bit. I think, the trick here, Jonathan, frankly, is tech is underperformed significantly. But if you told me we are going into a recession in the next 12 months, where you want to put your money in equity markets? It's in defensives, it's in large cap, it's in strong balance sheets, and it's in high quality stocks. And frankly, that almost points you back into tech. And I think that's one thing that investors are struggling a lot with. Earlier in the year, they didn't want to own cyclicals because growth was slowing, but inflation was rising. So let's say force them into energy. Yeah. I think they're going through a similar issue right now where they don't necessarily want to be in tech because it's sold off so much. But if you're really telling me growth is going to slow materially, that is a part of the market that you typically want to own. So I think that's one of the things that's driven the lack of conviction and sort of high volatility in markets.
Stuart Kaiser, UBS. Thank you, Stu. Good to have you in the studio here in New York City, and really plays into what we heard from JP Morgan this morning. They cut the price targets on a range of names: Snap, Google, Meta, Amazon, take your pick. Went on to say, given macro pressures, we are increasingly cautious around the impact of a broader economic slowdown. Ad spending, the issue here. highly correlated with GDP. So to Stu's point, Lisa, it kind of makes sense to maybe look around tech, but certain pockets of tech, there's a very, very, very cyclical story embedded in some of those names. Well, they go on to say, though, I think this is interesting, and it's kind of the JP Morgan House view at the investment bank right now, isn't it? They think a lot of this is already priced. They think a lot of this is already priced and the bar is low. For other people, we haven't even started to price what some people fear is coming.
Especially the bar has already been lowered so much for tech, and it's already been priced in if you think that people are going to go back into duration, right? I mean, this is sort of the other case for tech, is if you believe eventually people are going to go back into longer dated bonds and bring down those rates, then tech once again looks pretty terrific on just simply a valuation basis.
Seen some brutal calls this morning, haven't we? Can I talk about Carnival just briefly?
Please do. This is amazing.
So Morgan Stanley have come out with this call on Carnival, and I'll bring you just the snippet of it from the top of the page in the report. Listen to this. We cut our price target nearly in half. We introduce a new $0 bear case, given escalating leverage, and remain underweight. Stock's down about 7% in the pre-market.
I would go right to the leverage. I've always been amazed by the bond offerings.
A $0 bear case. I mean, that's not. Can we call that a bear case?
I could see surveillance doing it.
Don't we need something more dramatic for when you start to have
surveillance
bear case death.
A $0 sort of near end of the world experience for Carnival?
Immediate annihilation.
Come on, we could do a cruise. We could strap on the old Speedo and give lectures.
That's my bear case, Tom. The idea of going on a cruise with you guys.
With a Speedo.
Futures negative 0.25%. This is Bloomberg.
Now with the latest news from New York City and around the world, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, Lisa, John, a former White House aide, portrayed a violent and out-of-control Donald Trump in his presidency's final weeks before the House January 6th committee. Cassidy Hutchinson, an aide to White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, testified before Committee Vice Chair Liz Cheney that Trump knew about the various weapons that many of the rioters were carrying, but urged Secret Service officials to remove security apparatus at his rally before the Capitol attack.
I just want to confirm that that is when you heard the president say the people with weapons weren't there to hurt him and that he wanted the Secret Service to remove the magnetometers.
That's correct. In the photos that you displayed, we were standing towards the front of the tent with the TVs, really close to where he would walk out to go onto the stage. These conversations happened 2 to 3 minutes before he took the stage that morning.
Cassidy Hutchinson also told the panel Trump tried to grab the steering wheel from the presidential limo driver when he refused to take him to the Capitol. Health officials have announced a new monkeypox vaccination plan. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has the story.
Hundreds of thousands of doses will be made available under a tiered allocation system, prioritizing those who've been exposed to the virus in states with the highest infection rates. Unlike COVID, vaccination after monkeypox exposure can help significantly slow the spread of the virus. The CDC definition of high risk is, quote, men who've had sexual contact with men who've had multiple sex partners in a venue where there was known to be monkeypox or in an area where monkeypox is spreading. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
R. Kelly is being sentenced in a sex trafficking case that could put him behind bars for years. A judge is set to impose the sentence today in a federal court in New York City. Prosecutors are seeking a minimum 25-year term. Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios, this is Global News 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Surveillance is brought to you by Interactive Brokers' simple IBKR Global Trader app. Deposit in your local currency and trade stocks in the U.S., Europe, and Asia. Start your free trial at ibkr.com/global trader.
Bay State Business Time is 7:14. Time now for a check of traffic. Here's Malcolm Alter. Malcolm.
Thank you, Karen. This report is sponsored by News Nation. Right now, Mass Turnpike, look out for an accident in the breakdown lane just after Route 495. And then a left lane breakdown just after Route 9 in Framingham. You've got delays through Framingham and Newton. If you're coming up Route 3 in Rockland, look out for a couch in the right lane just before Route 228, and then it's sluggish from there right up to Union Street. Route 24 will slow you down coming up through Avon up onto Route 93. Want the news without the noise? News Nation is news for all America, reporting all sides, no spin and no agendas. Go to newsnationnow.com/join us to find News Nation on your television provider. I'm Malcolm Alter with the best ride in and out of the city on Bloomberg, 106.1 Boston, Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2. Karen?
All right, Malcolm, thank you. Now let's get a check of weather, and here's Rob Carolyn. Rob.
Karen, high pressure passes north of New England today. We're mostly sunny and warm, 80 to 85. It'll be partly cloudy tonight. Cold front could bring us a stray shower, 65. Sunny, 80 to 85 for tomorrow. Lots of sunshine and hot Friday, 90 to 95. Drive time, traffic, and weather updates all morning long. I'm Rob Carolyn on Bloomberg, 106.1 Boston, Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2. Karen?
All right, Rob, thank you. And currently it is 63 degrees in Watertown, 63 in Cohasset, and 60 in Wellesley. And Bloomberg surveillance continues. It's on a day when we've been watching futures this morning. They were a little changed for much of the morning and then started to move lower with S&P futures down 10 points. This is Bloomberg 106.1.
Live from Sintra, Portugal, Bloomberg speaks with Jerome Powell.
We're looking for something specific, and that is progress on inflation.
Christine Lagarde.
We are turning our back to negative interest rates.
And Andrew Bailey.
We think there are risks on the upside to inflation.
The Fed Chair, ECB President, and BOE governors sit down with Bloomberg's Francine Lacqua at the ECB Forum on Central Banking. This morning at 9. Only on Bloomberg 106.1 and Bloomberg Television.
Chances are you're jamming in your car right now. And since Liberty Mutual customizes car insurance so you only pay for what you need, Limu and I are going to show you some safe car dance moves. Hit it. Everybody, check your blind spots real quick. Now hands on the wheel. Put them 10 and 2 and move your head like a bird do. Only pay for what you need at libertymutual.com.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Data, analytics, technology, connected. Bloomberg's enterprise solutions integrate systems and workflows across your firm so you can increase transparency and maximize efficiency. Ready to think bigger? Start at Bloomberg.com/professional.
Bridgebank helps breakthrough ideas actually break through and remains dedicated to providing financial solutions to those committed to leveraging innovation to make the world a better place. Bridgebank, a division of Western Alliance Bank. Bridgebank. Be bold, venture wisely.
This June, in honor of Pride Month and Juneteenth, Bloomberg every Thursday in June at 1 p.m. Eastern. Bloomberg Equality, celebrating inclusion this Pride Month and all year long.
Today I'm announcing the United States will enhance our force posture in Europe and respond to the changed security environment, as well as strengthening our collective security. Together, our allies, we're going to make up sure as ever has been.
Significant moves from the President of the United States from New York City this morning. Good morning with Tom Keene and Lisa Abramowitz. I'm Jonathan Ferro. Futures are negative about 0.25% on the S&P. On the Nasdaq 100, we're down 1/3 of 1%. The data recently hasn't been great. You get these regional Fed manufacturing numbers. And you expect maybe more of the same. Throw in consumer confidence, some weak stuff there. Yields lower by a couple of basis points again, Tom, on a 10-year, 315.47.
Yeah, it's really important. Again, we're watching Euro Swissy for an historic moment to go through parity. We're almost there right now. We'll discuss that when it happens. What's going to happen at 9 o'clock Eastern Time, Wall Street time today, is a really important panel of what will be said and what will not be said. Among others, Jerome Powell and Christine Lagarde. We are advantaged by Anne-Marie Horton in Madrid with Maria Tadeo in her Madrid, and there is a decisive difference here in the stories of Lagarde and Powell. In Spain, there is 15% unemployment amid 10% inflation, and in the United States, it is 4% unemployment amid 9% inflation. Maria, let me go to you first here. What does Lagarde not want to do today on fragmentation? What does she want to be silent on as Francine Lacqua grills her?
And Tom, 10% inflation in a country like Spain, this was a big talker today. This is really what people talk about in this country, where you get in a taxi to come to NATO. The sad reality for a lot of the Ukrainian effort here is that the people are not debating the war in Ukraine or how to help Ukraine win the war, but the fact that, of course, fuel has risen so much over the past 2 months that it is becoming a problem for a lot of people in Europe. And this is before the winter. That's when everyone here agrees things will get really difficult for the European economy. I think for Christine Lagarde, it really is about not giving too much detail away on that fragmentation tool.
Yeah.
Wait for the July summit. Again, the rate hike, there's a lot of conversation about how fast she's going to go on that front. But I think she's really want to signal now that the ECB is in a position to tame inflation, but also set up policy for 19 countries that are very different by nature, which is a very difficult job.
Anne-Marie, Joe Biden has to worry about one country on unemployment and inflation. He will fly back to the joy and the worry, the angst of moving from 4% unemployment, dare I say, higher. How will he address that in fractious Washington?
Well, he's been trying to address it while he's been abroad, making sure that all his foreign policy goals, he pivots to why it's important to the United States. This was really a big talking point at the G7 in the Bavarian Alps, because as Maria said, while these leaders are gathering together to try these efforts, to help these efforts in Ukraine, what actual people on the ground are talking about across the board are higher consumer prices. When you look at inflation, it's really groceries, it's gasoline. These are things that are worrisome. So the president really needs to make sure that while he does deliver these foreign policy messages, and we should know today was a big goal for him strategically. About a month ago, I was in the Rose Garden when he said that Finland and Sweden need to be a part of NATO. They meet every requirement and then some. This is something he was able to achieve. But is it going to be overshadowed with this list and all of these problems he has at home? The party is pushing for him to do more on women's reproductive right. Of course, after the Supreme Court struck down Roe v. Wade, then of course you have overshadowing a lot of the American public and media right now was the testimony yesterday out of the January 6th. And then, of course, it's inflation. These are the issues he has to face while he's also meeting with these leaders in Madrid.
Maria, how much daylight is there between world leaders when it comes to fighting inflation, given that all nations are facing a similar issue? It rhymes, but it's not the same.
It's not the same, but Lisa, if I may, actually, we now know that President Zelensky was on a video conference with NATO leaders, and he said today the top priority for you at this point should be, of course, to improve and strengthen NATO, but also to help Ukraine win. And when we say win, we mean on the battlefield. So we want to need more weapons, and it hopefully comes out of this meeting. That is the message from President Zelensky. And in terms of the economy, look, I think that for the Europeans now, it is very clear that this is going to be a very difficult winter. They worry, particularly the Germans and the Italians, if Vladimir Putin is going to cut off the gas. And for the time being, the impression that we get is that Europe feels we've done a lot to help Ukraine on the financial front. The sanctions for the time being need to stop because we really need a breather, especially because they try to get in good shape ahead of September with the storage of energy before the winter. That is really the concern for everyone here.
To the two of you, absolutely fantastic, as always. Seriously, we joke around a lot, but two of the best international correspondents in the business, Anne-Marie Jourdain alongside Maria Tadeo. Thank you, guys.
If I can mention one thing, John, quickly.
Sure.
If you don't mind, if I can mention one thing. While we talk about gasoline prices at home, really dodging this president, yesterday, me and the producer, Jason Hoffman, filled up our tank before we gave back our car at the airport. It was $7.64 per gallon of gasoline in German. It's about $10 in the United Kingdom. So these inflation concerns are even more dramatic in Europe.
I was just saying how great you are, and then you cut us off. Anne-Marie, thank you, as always. Anne-Marie Jourdain alongside Maria Tadeo. Lisa, I wanted to pick up on what you were talking about, because I think it's so important. When the three of these individuals sit down a little bit later this morning, when we hear from President Lagarde, Governor Bailey and Chairman Powell, President Lagarde, in some ways, and she's been diplomatic about it, she has actually revealed the differences between what the US is experiencing and what Europe is experiencing. And she talks about the more robust fiscal response that we had in America too. And I just wonder if that's something that comes up in the conversation a little bit later.
In what tenor, though? And this, I think, will be interesting. Is it to say we don't have to go as hard as the U.S. and we can still see some sort of transitory light types of inflationary impulse that rolls over because of the lack of strength in the United States? Or is it to say that we can actually afford to spend more and we can go further? I mean, how is she going to use those differences to really draw a distinction in the policy that they then put out?
TK, your thoughts on what's about to happen in the next 90 minutes or so?
It's what they don't say. It's absolutely what they don't say. There's going to be a lot of talk, but these guys are pros. Francine's going to ask them some tough questions, and I think you're going to be shocked. And I like the idea that one of you said the fragmentation is really not going to come up in detail with Lagarde. But, I mean, Powell is just going to try to get out of this unscathed.
They're in a tough spot. Kit Dukes of SocGen's going to join us later. This is what he had to say about the Swiss National Bank. Caught between an Alp and a hard place. TK, that's the line from Kit this morning as Euro-Swiss test parity all over again for the second time this year.
I think that's a song Barry sang at the piano bar.
Is that right?
A couple years ago.
A few drinks in.
Yeah.
I was alongside you. Futures down 8 on the S&P. We're down about 0.2%. Yields in 2 basis
it's like
points.
A Christopher Cross song.
On a 10-year.
Between a Alp and a hard praise.
15. Oh, don't let me stop you. Carry on. Okay. Any drums in that?
No, I think Jeff Porcaro did the drums, actually.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay.
Bloomberg Surveillance is on your radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and iHeartRadio. Plus on Bloomberg TV, Comcast Channel 1122, Verizon Fios Channel 605, and always on Bloomberg.com.
When you're an innovative business, every blinking cursor is an opportunity. What will you do with it? Will you make something better or create something new? Our Dell Technologies advisors provide you with expertise and tools with Windows 11 to do incredible things. Because we believe there's an innovator in all of us. To do more with a Latitude laptop, Dell Technologies recommends Windows 11 Pro for business. Call a Dell Technologies advisor at 877-ASK-DELL.
Doug. Chances are you're jamming in your car right now. And since Liberty Mutual customizes car insurance so you only pay for what you need, Limu and I are going to show you some safe car dance moves. Hit it. Everybody, check your blind spots real quick. Now hands on the wheel. Put them 10 in 2 and move your head like a bird do. Only pay for what you need at libertymutual.com.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg 1061 Boston Newburyport and 92.9 HD2.
Hey, good morning. Bay State business time is 7:27, 66 degrees, partly sunny skies at Logan Airport. We're going to have a mostly sunny day ahead. The high temperature right around the mid-80s. And here are some of the other stories we're following this morning. Massachusetts lawmakers are set to consider ways to strengthen abortion rights. Top Democrats say they are feeling a sense of urgency in the wake of last week's Supreme Court ruling eliminating the constitutional right to an abortion. The House yesterday gave initial approval to the 21-page bill shielding providers of reproductive and gender-affirming care and their patients from out-of-state legal action. And Speaker Ron Mariano said a full vote on that bill is planned for today. 2 more parents have been sentenced in the Varsity Blues admissions scandal, but Janet Wu explains why they will only serve a day in prison.
Bruce and Davina Isaacson of Hillsborough, California, were sentenced to a day in prison, a year of probation, and 250 hours of community service. If that sentence seems light, it's because a couple cooperated with the government's investigation. The Isaacsons pleaded guilty to paying William Rick Singer $600,000 to facilitate cheating for one daughter's college entrance exam and to pose both daughters as fake athletic recruits. The Isaacsons were also charged with claiming the money as a fake tax deduction. Janet Wu, Bloomberg 1061, Boston Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2.
Thanks, Janet. A lot of cities in Massachusetts still lack internet access. We get more from Bloomberg's Ed Corey.
A new report funded by the Massachusetts Competitive Partnership finds large portions of Lawrence and Fall River still lack adequate broadband access. The Globe says the report details how 59% of homes in Chelsea lack adequate broadband, for example, and 56% in Fall River. The numbers are also high in Springfield and Lawrence at 50%, as well as Salem, New Bedford, and Pittsfield. Boston is at 43%. The report cites inadequate wiring inside buildings, too many users on the same connection, or no ability to pay for a high-speed plan. Ed Corey, Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2.
And thank you. And the Boston School Committee will choose a new superintendent of schools at its meeting tonight. Currently 66 degrees, partly sunny skies at Logan Airport. This is Bloomberg 106.1 Boston.
You get bored of listening to the Perma Bears and the Perma Bulls, but when you hear someone who's been bullish for the best part of 10 years say that what we're seeing from this Federal Reserve is the biggest policy mistake since the 1930s, I think it gets your attention, and that's what we heard from Steve Cheverone of Federated a little bit earlier this morning. He is very cautious on this market. Futures right now down 0.2% on the S&P. On the Nasdaq, we're down around about 1/3%, and the data so far over the last couple of days has not been great. We've talked about the Richmond Fed manufacturing number, dreadful. The Dallas Fed manufacturing number, pretty dreadful. And the Conference Board consumer confidence number, not great either. You add in the PMIs from last week, look ahead to the ISM. You can see why maybe people are starting to think about, even more so, looking at the long end of the yield curve. 2s, 10s and 30s look like this. We had a sniff of 325 yesterday. We came back in. 10s are down a basis point at 315.84. And one of those, looking at the longer end of the yield curve, may be sovereigns, developed market sovereigns to be specific. Max Kettner over at HSBC, very cautious on risk assets, 1 on high yield credit, 2 on equities, and much more constructive on what's going to happen here in bonds. Perhaps that's your view. Maybe others, Bramwell, would push back, given that this time is very, very different, isn't it? It's not just about lower growth expectations. What do you do with the inflation piece of that story as you look ahead as well?
How much is this about Fed credibility and central banks being able to get inflation under control and then overshooting perhaps and giving duration back a bit? If you take a look at longer-term inflation expectations, they confirm the Max Kettner view of things because they've been coming down rapidly over the past few weeks.
We'll hear from those central bankers in around about 90 minutes from now, sitting down with Francine Lacqua, Chairman Powell, President Lagarde and Governor Bailey. And this is going to be important, particularly for Europe. Take a look at this. We'll finish on European bonds and take a look at the German curve, say 2s and 10s. Your 2-year right now comes in a couple of basis points, down 3. And, Tom, that's off the back of these regional German CPI prints that were a bit softer than expected. But as we talked about with Maria and Anne-Marie, Spanish inflation into double figures puts the ECB in a little bit of a tough spot.
Yeah, and
going into their next meeting.
And the fragmentation is what she's not going to want to talk about. I guess that policy coming out in a number of days, if not weeks. But, John, it's radically different, and the polarities there. And I know we look at the Italian-German difference in yield as sort of the litmus paper, if you will, of a system. And they've actually been sort of quiescent, but I don't buy it for a minute. I think there's massive country-by-country challenges there. And again, a region at war.
That the Italian-German spread that you bring up, Tom, that's coming from about 240 at the wides, all the way back in, sub-200, pushing around about 180. So a bit more behaved this time around.
On your sabbatical, you move the needle on GDP.
Is that what happened? I brought spreads in.
Yeah, you
Thanks for that, Tom.
Single-handedly.
When are you going to let this go? You've got to take a vacation sometimes, Tom. It's good for you. You take a breather. I know you like the European way secretly. I know you do. Which is why you love talking about Euro Swiss and all things European.
I'm going on a Halls when Romain goes on Halls.
You're going to call it a Halls?
How do you call it?
A holiday.
Halls.
A holiday. You can call it a Halls.
Yeah.
Or a vacation if you're
It's not cough medicine.
Don't you like holiday? Doesn't that make sense, Lisa? Doesn't that word just
Halls sounds like it's cough medicine.
Okay. All right, are we done? I think we're done. I think that's my decision. Cross-asset price action looks like this. Romain, I don't know how much we pay him to turn up this early in the morning to tune in for this.
You guys can keep going.
Romain, do you get a bonus for tolerating this?
No, apparently not, but thanks for reminding me that I need to talk to Mr. Al here. Let's get a quick check here on the broader market, guys. We talked yesterday about all the weakness that we saw in the market. A lot of that drag came from those big cap tech stocks, and that's pretty much the story here in the pre-market. Not quite as severe as what we saw in the cash session, but definitely something to keep an eye on. Tesla shares down about 1% here on the day, setting up for a third day of declines here, of course, on this penultimate day of the first half. The first half, that's seen Tesla shares now down about 33%. I want to bring your attention, though, to some of the macroeconomic conditions and the idea that you have a lot of stocks out there that some people think sort of are recession-proof. We got two interesting earnings, one out of McCormick, the spice maker, and one out of General Mills. And these stocks are going in opposite direction. General Mills surprising to the upside. Those shares up 2.5%. Organic net sales growth coming in at 13%. Food service growth was up 25%. And their margins and everything else really just blew it out the water with regards to analysts' expectations. General Mills did talk about inflationary pressures, but said they were able to navigate that. Meanwhile, we heard from McCormick, which was talking about those same inflationary pressures, and apparently they weren't able to navigate that. They actually posted a surprise decline in sales, and more importantly, their gross margins contracted by almost 5 percentage points. Those shares down 7% here on the day. Flip it up. I got a couple stocks here for you, Tom, as you prepare for your holiday season here. Keep an eye on Pinterest. I know you're a big Pinterest guy. Changing up the guard there, the CEO and also the founder of the company.
What do you think? What, was he pushed out?
I don't know if he was pushed out, but he's been there for some time, and there's been a lot of concerns by investors that maybe he wasn't the person to continue leading this company. He is stepping aside. He's going to stay with the company, Tom, so don't worry. He'll be there as an executive chairman.
TK loves
but they're
Pinterest.
building in Bill ready. Yeah, Tom.
I mean, can you tell me what Pinterest does? Because I still don't know.
It's an advertising-based platform, John.
What do you do on it, though?
You could plan out your wedding, Tom. You could plan out your holiday. I mean, Tom, when you're getting ready to go on your holiday, you want to find a nice shirt, pair of shorts, flip-flops.
I studied it for social media. I was asked at Bloomberg to study it.
Have we got a Tom Keene account on Pinterest?
Study it. Oh.
There may be some debris out there, but John, I never figured it out.
Yeah.
It's hugely female and it has a real geographic bias to the Midwest.
Keep going, Tom. I mean,
no, it's true.
We all want to know. What does that mean?
I don't know. It's like planning weddings, just like Romaine said.
Well, Tom, I mean, you know.
Lisa, weigh in here.
No, Lisa's just letting this go. She's just giving you. Ramo's just giving you more rope. Ramo's just giving you more rope. Carry on, TK.
Please. Want to keep going?
I think I'm done, guys. Coinbase down 2%, Tom. I know you care about that too.
Tom might be back in the next segment.
Holidays,
we'll
guys.
find out in about 5 minutes. Romaine, thank you.
You're welcome.
Romaine Bostic, we appreciate it.
I'm
and we
glad
look forward to the close.
Yeah, I'm glad Romaine mentions General Mills. I weighed into the General Mills piece there, the 9-year piece. Back then it was a 10-year piece at a 102. I'm enjoying it this morning at an 81.
Have you
That's called
studied
price
that too?
down, yield up. Got it right.
Is it greatly
Kathy
female?
Jones here, so I can yell at her because she told me to get
You
into
hope she's still
bonds there. She fixed income strategist at Charles Schwab. Kathy, that's the reality. Not a bunch of bond strategists talking about spreads and credit quality. People listening and watching bought a piece at par, and they're enjoying it at 81 or 82, like the General Mills 2.25 of 31. What do you do if you own that bond?
Well, you have two choices, Tom. One is you hold it to maturity, and it goes back to par, because that's what bonds do unless there's a default. Or you sell it now, take your tax loss, and replace it with a higher yielding bond.
Kathy, when does the concern start to creep in that we're not seeing issuance really pick up and that a lot of companies can choose not to now, but maybe in 6 months and certainly in 12 months, it'll be less of an option?
Yeah, I think right now corporate balance sheets are still among the investment grade community still pretty strong, and they did load up on debt at lower yields, so they're in pretty good shape. But we'll probably see issuance pick up. There's always going to be a window open, later on in the year as we get into next year. There will have to be some refinancing that takes place. I think a lot of the issuance now is just waiting for yields to come back down.
Do you think that they will? I mean, that's the issue. If they don't come back down, they're looking at financing costs that are double what they were potentially just a couple of years ago. How much does the need for it to come down really determine the next default cycle?
Well, I think when you're talking about high yield or certainly bank loans, then you have a problem with short rates moving up, particularly in the bank loan sector, because they adjust. The duration's very short. They adjust very rapidly. And for those companies, which are basically junk companies, their cost of financing is going to jump, 40, 50%. And that is one reason we're not big fans of bank loans right now. I think it'll also hit the low end of the high yield market because, spreads have moved up a bit here, but they're probably going to move up some more. We think there's a high risk of recession, particularly if the Fed goes really hard and fast the way they're talking about, and that's not going to be good for the high yield market.
An historic moment for global Wall Street. We interrupt with Kathy Jones of Charles Schwab. Euro Swissy plunges through parity right now. Strong Swiss franc, and that is an unexpected off what SNB did a number of days ago. Kathy, that speaks volumes of the unexpected out there. What is the unexpected if the Fed moves 75 beeps in July or onward?
Well, I think it does translate into the FX market. Obviously, if the Fed goes 75, that's built into the market, and I think a fair amount of tightening is built into the market. If Loretta Mester gets her 4% next year, then I think that we're seeing an inverted yield curve, all else being equal. It'd be very difficult with the economic indicators rolling over to see yields move up from there. I think you'd see an inverted curve. And that translates when we look at, say, the Japanese bond market and where the yen is and what's happening in Europe, that's going to translate into a pretty stiff global tightening cycle. And that's when things break.
Kathy, thank you. You're one of the best. I love hearing from you. Kathy Jones there of Charles Schwab. Thank you. Break, Tom.
That's when things break.
Yep. Here's the choice that the S&P faces, according to Kit Jukes. Either, and the choice is simple, he says, they intervene in whatever size the markets demand or let the franc fly through Euro-Swiss parity and overshoot. Is that the beginning of that right now, Tom?
Well, it is. And, of course, they've been very creative with equity ownership. I mentioned the Apple shares, I believe 71 million earlier, John, but it's much more than Apple. They're basically running a sovereign wealth fund within the S&P. I guess that Mr. Jordan can correct me on that, but that's sure what it looks like. Each country, and at Francine's panel, John, each country has its own challenges, but I'm going to say this, and I'm not just saying this because, you know how much I love John, but United Kingdom is exceptional here. It is where people have secondary ownership. It's where they travel to. The city is the global financial center. And Governor Bailey on this panel today is not only for the United Kingdom, but international as well.
As a case study, I agree with you, Tom, but do you think from the perspective of consequences and spillover, potential spillover?
No, it's always Powell.
That's Powell and the Guard,
it's always Powell.
Still.
Yeah, still. I mean, you look at the unexpected. We're looking at Euro-Swissy. We're looking at Finland and Sweden and NATO. John, these are things I never fathomed in my life.
I just can't wait for your Pinterest coverage in the next segment. That'll be fun.
Well,
You're going to give us a price target.
I don't even know how to log on anymore. Let me see if I can log on the break.
I went on that website maybe once, Brammer. I've got no idea what I'm doing there. Zero. Was it mood boards or something?
I've got to be honest. Even though I am female, I have never logged on either.
Gone on it. I'm sure people share that view.
Your kids are on Pinterest, Bramo.
I don't think so.
Doesn't he do Nike? Rare Nike sneakers.
Yeah,
on Pinterest.
He's more. Yeah.
Futures down a tenth on the S&P. Good morning. This is Bloomberg.
Now with the latest news from New York City and around the world, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, Lisa, John, President Joe Biden is kicking off the first full day of meetings at the NATO summit in Madrid today. He spoke about Finland and Sweden's successful bid to join NATO for the first time since Turkey dropped their opposition yesterday.
At this summit, the full alliance is going to welcome Finland and Sweden, their historic application for membership, and their decision to move away from neutrality, traditional neutrality, to join NATO alliance is going to make us stronger and more secure, and NATO stronger.
President Biden also pledged to boost land, sea, and air power in Europe in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Reaction still continues from the bombshell testimony about the events surrounding the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. A former White House aide told the House committee investigating the attack that then President Trump desperately attempted to join his supporters as they marched to the Capitol. In her testimony, Cassidy Hutchinson says a defiant Trump grabbed at the steering wheel of the presidential SUV when the Secret Service refused to allow him to go to the Capitol. Hutchinson also testified about an angry Trump when then Attorney General Bill Barr denied there was election fraud in an interview.
I first noticed there was ketchup dripping down the wall, and there's a shattered porcelain plate on the floor. The valet had articulated that the president was extremely angry at the Attorney General's AP interview and had thrown his lunch against the wall.
Trump has dismissed Cassidy Hutchinson as a total phony. The lawyer for Ginny Thomas, the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, says there is no sufficient basis yet for her to testify before the January 6th committee. Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios, this is Global News 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg's Surveillance is on your radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and iHeartRadio. Plus on Bloomberg TV, Comcast Channel 1122, Verizon Fios Channel 605, and always on Bloomberg.com.
Bay State Business Time is 7:44. Time now for a check of traffic. Here's Malcolm Alter. Malcolm.
Thank you, Karen. This report is sponsored by Indeed.com. On the Mass Turnpike, look out for medical emergency just after Route 495, and then a left lane breakdown right near Route 9, and then you've got occasional delays through Framingham, as well as getting through the Newton area. If you're coming down the upper end of Route 128, you've got delays out of the Linfield-Wakefield area right down through Waltham. 93 will slow you down a bit getting through Wilmington, and then again right around the Stoneham area, the rest of the way into the city. On the Southeast Expressway, it's all tied up from Braintree to Boston. Look out for a broken down truck getting across the Tobin Bridge. If your business is feeling a summer hiring wave, then you need Indeed. Their all-in-one hiring solution makes it easy to attract, interview, and hire candidates. Visit Indeed.com/credit and get $75 towards your first sponsored job. Terms and conditions apply. I'm Malcolm Alter with the best ride in and out of the city on Bloomberg, 106.1 Boston, Newburyport, 92.9 HD2. Karen?
All right, Malcolm, thank you. Now let's get a check of weather, and here's Rob Carolyn. Rob.
Karen, high pressure in control today. We've got some high cloudiness coming up from the south and west. We're mostly sunny through them, 80 to 85 this afternoon. Front goes by tonight, partly cloudy, maybe a stray shower, 65. Turning sunny tomorrow, we're 80 to 85, and a hot day Friday. Abundant sun, it's 90 to 95. Drive time, traffic, and weather updates all morning long. I'm Rob Carolyn on Bloomberg, 106.1 Boston, Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2. Karen?
All right, Rob, thank you. Currently, it is 64 degrees in Newburyport, 63 in Framingham, 65 in Brookline.
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts. Weekday mornings on Bloomberg 106.1.
I'm Paul Sweeney. And I'm Matt Miller. Mark Makepeace, CEO at Wilshire, discusses investing strategies as we head into the second half of the year. Plus, Tracy McMillian of Wells Fargo gives her outlook for the economy.
Bloomberg Markets, today at 10 a.m. on the Global Business News Leader. Bloomberg 106.1 Boston Newburyport and 92.9 HD2. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Dave Gockel is chairman and CEO of Langen, an international engineering and environmental consulting firm. He's also a strong advocate for funding research partnerships between universities and industry. Dave is a graduate and board member of NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology.
How do we evolve as a society? We solve problems. And who are those problem solvers? They're the engineers and the scientists. So the demand for STEM education as we go forward is just tremendous. I think that NJIT has always done a wonderful job of bringing leaders in the industry to fund research that goes on and staying connected with the real world and making sure that the students get that exposure. NJIT has really expanded its programs to cover a much broader landscape while still delivering quality.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
At the 120, 130 levels, you're beginning to really start getting that pain threshold. And we got that before it started coming off again. So I think that's the target you're looking at. 125, 130 is really when you start seeing demand destruction kicking in.
Kona Hack there, the head of research at EDF Man. Fantastic to catch up with her, always is. Futures just about negative, bouncing off the lows. We're down by 0.06% on the S&P. On the Nasdaq 100, down by 0.15. Things improve. Yields lower by a basis point, 315.84 on a 10-year. Bill Ackman, the hedge fund investor, out on Twitter this morning, Tom, says the following. Business is a confidence game. CEOs are losing confidence because of uncertainty due to the perceived risk of sustained high inflation. He goes on to say the Fed must act decisively to subdue inflation and inflationary expectations, then business confidence will be restored. That's the view from Bill Ackman this morning, something he said a few times over the last few weeks.
It's in the textbooks and very Greenspanian, and what I would suggest to it is this new word, John, and maybe you'll hear it in this panel. I don't think so. It's sort of a Bullard-esque word, is front-loading. We've been talking about this on surveillance for months.
TK, I think that's something that will come up. because that's some of the theory.
Just get it done.
That's some of the theory. I agree with you.
Get it done kind of thing. Here's what we're going to do. We've mentioned it, oil up 6% off the bottom really now. Brent crude 119. Excuse me, I missed that, John. 118 up to 119.23. Enough to get Will Kennedy on, Bloomberg executive editor for energies and commodities as well. Will, I want you to talk about something I learned in school, which is Blasian demand destruction. This is the demand destruction that Javier Blas writes about. Are you seeing demand destruction across Europe when Javier Blas tells me that Netherlands natural gas is over $200 equivalent of Brent barrel? Is it evident out there yet, demand destruction?
Perhaps at the margin, Tom. I don't think there's been widespread demand destruction. We've seen some heavy industry close down. The UK, for example, has lost a fertilizer plant. It had two, now it only has one. That's been closed permanently. Fertilizer, of course, one of the most gas-intensive industries out there. We'll no doubt see more if prices stay at these levels, and they probably will. But the other thing I would tell you is that it's summer, and gas demand really isn't at its highest, and where we're going to see the impact is going into the winter, where people are going to have very tough choices about how much to heat their homes, and they're likely to be colder than they were last winter.
And Brent crude, what is our reporting of the significance of going through whatever the daily moving average kind of high is? I'm looking here, Will Kennedy, right now, and I know it's like a 127, 128, but really the peaks have been, we're almost there, like a 124 as well. What will be the significance of a 125 print?
I think we're looking at a resurgent oil price here. One of the things that I would say about oil right now is that when you look at the time structure, the relative value of contracts across the curve, people are really pricing the front month, the front of the curve really, really strongly. And that's telling you there's a lot of desire for barrels right now that refiners are willing to pay up. And I think that, it can attack those levels that you discuss quite quickly. And of course, once they go through them, that often gives a bit of a surge. So, there is a bullish argument to make from these levels, Tom.
Yeah, and Lisa, Michael Tran with Halima Croft at RBC was blistering today about asymmetric calls where you go to 150, and he even mentioned above 150. He alluded to that, Lisa.
Which raises the issue of demand destruction, which so many people have been looking for as the remedy for some of the high prices. Will, how much are we already seeing that? And I'm pointing to the Conference Board's survey that it put out yesterday, showing that people were ratcheting back plans for road trips and even for just general vacations over the next 6 months.
Yeah, that was a very interesting piece of data, Lisa. As you say, people have really changed their expectations of how much they're going to drive this summer. And if that comes true, then obviously demand will be lower than otherwise thought. But we're not seeing that necessarily in the market yet. The American refining industry is still working as hard as it can to produce gasoline and diesel, suggesting that customers are willing to buy whatever they can produce. And refining margins, we haven't had any data for almost 2 weeks. We'll get some this morning, and I think traders will be very interested to see what the latest demand figures are for petroleum products in the US and whether they see any softening of the normal seasonal pattern.
Well, as NATO members meet, they're talking about possibly capping the price of Russian oil on the price of crude.
It's a very difficult question to answer, Lisa. And of course, as you say, the scheme itself is quite complicated, and it requires the use of the insurance market to basically insist on a price for Russian crude. I think that when you look to what happened at the G7 yesterday, it was an instruction to examine this idea more, which is a way of really kicking it into the long grass. I think that many people out there think it's going to be too complicated, and that Russia will find ways through insuring the cargoes itself, for example, of bypassing it. So it's hard to see this happening in the short term at least, and that makes it very hard to see what the impact would be on the crude price. It would depend how Russia responded. Would they go along with it and get what price they can, or would they say, well, we're not going to play and take more oil off the market? I think those things are very uncertain.
Super complex. Will, a clinic from you, as always. Thank you, sir. Will Kennedy out of London. Just looking at the shares of Bed Bath & Beyond getting hammered in the pre-market. There's an executive change. The numbers, Lisa, they're really not great.
Yeah, Adjusted loss per share, $2.83 versus the expectation for a 5-cent year-over-year gain. Just overall, not only is it bad in terms of what they have seen, but what they expect to see. And how much does this come down to inventory and planning for an environment where people are buying very different items than they were 6 months ago? How do you plan for that in advance in the fast-moving pandemic backdrop?
When did they get put out of their misery? I mean, they're negative 16% per year for the last 10 years. They're making, John, well, forget about the losses they're making. Even at the EBITDA line, it's pennies per dollar.
Do you want my amateur customer feedback, Tom?
I don't know.
There is way too much in that store. Way too much.
I heard his Bed Bath & Beyond gripes.
Way too much.
I hear you.
I mean, seriously, you go in there and it's just overwhelming.
I mean, I'm looking like as a CFA exercise, you look at their income statement and you go, really?
Well, the sales are down 23% in the first quarter, Tom. Mark Tritton, didn't he come over from Target, Lisa? Wasn't he meant to sort some of this stuff out?
Well, Target's having its own problems, right? I mean, how much are you seeing the tale of different retailers that planned accordingly in terms of how much they stocked up for a very different period in terms of what people are buying, how much they're going to have to actually discount, how much they're dealing with higher employee turnover, all of these issues that each company really had to deal with, and some did it all right and some didn't.
Final word on Pinterest. Lisa, you want to squeeze that in?
I'm actually going to bail Tom out here.
Are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Okay,
because, we were making fun of him for saying, overwhelmingly female. But it actually is, and as of January 2022, 77% of Pinterest's audiences were female.
TK said he'd done a study.
So evidently
did you read,
he had.
Did you read
I
his
was
study?
asked, John,
I read this
years
study
ago
by one Keen
to do
T.
Pinterest. I mean, I've deleted the account, but to do Pinterest to study if there was an audience.
What
and
is
we
it?
determined there isn't.
Did you do a mood board?
There isn't
Did you
an
make
audience.
a mood board?
No, it was me and, Sarah and, it was years ago.
Okay. All right. Futures are up 0.1% higher, Tom. We're an hour away from Chairman Powell on a panel in Sintra, Portugal.
Get Bloomberg surveillance anytime, anywhere. Subscribe to our daily podcast on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, and all your favorite platforms. Stay informed with the latest in finance, economics, and investment on the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast.
Hybrid work is here. It's there. It's everywhere. But for someone to be able to work from here, there has to be someone here, making sure everything is safe, secure, consistent. So log in from here or here, assured that someone is here, ready to fix anything, anytime, anywhere, even here. That's because nobody, and I mean nobody, makes hybrid work better. Cisco, the bridge to possible.
The Bloomberg Crypto Summit is back for its second year on July 19th. 2022 is proving groundbreaking for crypto, coins plummeting, job cuts, liquidity events, and regulations looming. Can confidence be restored? Which crypto projects will survive? Top voices in coins, blockchains, Web3, and investing share what the smart money should know about the next phase of this industry. Founding sponsor Grayscale. Register at BloombergLive.com/crypto/radio.
Good morning. Bay State Business Time is 7:57. It is currently 66 degrees, partly sunny skies at Logan Airport. We will have a mostly sunny day ahead. The high temperature right around 85. Here are some of the other stories we've been following this morning. The Boston School Committee going to choose a new superintendent of schools at its meeting tonight. Somerville School Superintendent Mary Skipper and Boston Region 1 Superintendent Tommy Welch have made it to the final round. The decision comes as the NAACP is calling for a pause in the search process to allow for more diverse candidates. Elementary and Secondary Education Commissioner Jeff Riley earning top marks. The board voting unanimously to rate Riley's work over the most recent school year as a 4.75 out of 5. Riley was also awarded a 2% salary increase effective July 3rd, which would push his compensation from around $257,000 per year, as reported in state payroll records, to more than $262,000 per year. After a nationwide search, Emmanuel College has named a new president, and Bloomberg's Janet Wu has more.
Dr. Mary Boyd, a chemist, will become Emmanuel's 13th president. She has small college experience as current provost of Berry College in Georgia. She also served as a dean at UC San Diego. Emmanuel, founded in 1919 as a women's Catholic college, is now all gender. The Fenway campus just welcomed one of its largest incoming freshman classes ever. Janet Wu, Bloomberg 106.1, Boston Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2.
All right, Janet, thank you. Well, the stock of Boston Beer has received its third downgrade in the past week. We get more from Bloomberg's Steve Potus.
It's enough to make your suds go flat. A growing chorus of analysts expect the maker of Samuel Adams Beer and Truly Hard Seltzer to lower its fiscal 2022 guidance. Goldman Sachs downgraded the stock to a sell from neutral as the demand for hard seltzers continues to peter out. The recent cut follows downgrades at UBS and Bernstein last week. Boston Beer is expected to report second quarter results on July 21st. The company's stock has slid 69% over the past 12 months. Steve Potusk, Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2.
Thanks, Stephen. Flight delays and cancellations are easing at Logan Airport this morning. 16 flights are canceled, 36 delayed so far. Yesterday, there were 29 flights canceled and 191 delayed. This is Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2.
WRCA Watertown, WBOS HD2 Brookline, WNBP W291CC and W221EE Newburyport, W291CC Boston, Bloomberg 106.1.
Tightening financial conditions is part of the Fed's solution to the inflation problem, which means, of course, the market will go lower.
We're not yet seeing any elevated signs of credit risk that would suggest a problem.
We're going to see a pickup in macro volatility. We've seen that. I think this is real and persistent.
There is a path to a soft landing. It's perhaps narrower than many of us would want it to be.
A high probability of a hard landing. I'm not convinced we're priced for that.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrow, and Lisa Abramowitz.
Good morning, everyone. Jonathan Farrow, Lisa Abramowitz, and Tom Keene on radio, on television. Not your average Wednesday. No question about this. Yes, economic data tomorrow. But, John, economic data in 1 hour. Francine Lacroix speaks to the world's central bankers.
What a lineup, Tom. Chairman Powell, President Lagarde, Governor Bailey sitting down with Francine. And we've got a couple of questions, haven't we? How much damage will they inflict on this economy? How much will they tolerate higher inflation? For how long? Tom, you've talked about that move down from 8%. Perhaps down towards 5%, 4%, 3%. These are the kind of things we need to try and tease out going into 2023.
David Rosenberg with a blistering note out of Toronto this morning saying, let's go. This is the front-loading concept. You wonder if that's going to come up. Let's get it done. Let's raise rates to get the first tranche of inflation slowdown to happen.
Loretta Mester on board of the Cleveland Fed. Let's go 75 again. President Mary Daly of the San Francisco Fed on board. Let's go 75 basis points all over again. It's not just about the Fed now, Tom. It's about the ECB as well. They're set to make a move. They're teeing us up for 25. Will they have to go a little bit more? German CPI, inflation coming in at 8.2%. The median estimate was 8.8%. That data's just come out. We had a little bit of a lead into that from the regional CPI prints out of Germany earlier this morning, looking for that downside surprise. You'll get the headline number, Tom, this Friday.
And the idea of double-digit inflation in Spain, obviously very, very different. Lisa, it leads up to looking at the tea leaves, and the killer tea leaf right now is Brent crude exploding out. What was it, 115 out to a 119 level, up 1.1%.
A different story than it was last week when people believed that there was going to be some sort of economic downturn that would reduce demand significantly for oil. That lasted about 5 minutes as people went back to realizing the actual market was really tight. I do want to just pick up on something, Tom, you were talking about earlier, the Euro Swissy, on the heels of that inflation data that John was talking about. You see it move back just a little bit. How much does the ECB dovetail this nuanced picture of inflation, a nuanced picture of economic deterioration in Europe, with a call of being hawkish enough to support the euro? And how much is that going to be the main theme out of this potential panel, Tom?
Let's get to the data check. We've got an important guest here, getting Kit Jukes to join us later in the hour from SocGen on that panel. John, I'm just going to look at a bit of a reversal here with green on the screen. It's a nudgy tape is how I scientifically call it, John.
Just a bit of a lift. We'll use your word, a nudge higher, Tom. Nudge. Up a third of 1% on the S&P, on the Nasdaq up a third of 1% also. Yields in a couple of basis points. That's been the story over the last couple of days. We had a little look at 325 rather, on a 10-year. Still not used to that 3 handle. We had a little look at 325 in the last 24 hours and then backed away. Largely, Tom, because the data just has not been great stateside over the last few weeks.
Yeah. And again, the disinflationary trend. John, what do you make of the German inflation number there?
Expected after we saw the regional print, Tom. There's a story about travel and train tickets in there that have pulled things lower just a little bit. Does it change the mood music or just the volume on the mood music? I think it changes the volume. Doesn't change the track. It's the same story for this ECB. They've got work to do.
John and Lisa are going to pick it up here with Erin Brown. She's multi-asset strategies portfolio manager at PIMCO. But Erin, I need to digress. We had Abby Joseph Cohen on with us 8, 9, 10 days ago, and I think of the work that Sally Krawchuk has done with this over the years. No one I know is as invested in girls as you are in finance with Girls Who Invest. You've really put some quality time into that. Tell us where the momentum is now with Girls Who Invest, getting more women into this business.
Sure. So we've spent a lot of time really focusing on those very early onset years and trying to build a pipeline for more women.
Well, like finance. 7 or 8 years old, or are you going a little older?
We're starting a little bit older. We're starting with sophomores in college, really priming them for being prepared to enter the workforce as they start to move into their junior and senior years, and really look at the industry holistically to really attract women as investors into the business. So not just looking to hire women into finance, but really specifically as investors.
And Lisa, what this is about is enjoying losing money early on so you become adult about it and actually get to work on it.
Equal opportunity to lose money in a market that's increasingly unclear. Erin, when you talk to individuals, women and others, as they come into the market, how do you try to frame the moment at a time when uncertainty seems to be the catchphrase for everyone, and people are looking at potentially a new, and I'm doing this just for you, Tom, a new paradigm for inflation and growth?
Absolutely. And I think that's really what we're seeing right now, which is a transition point in the market. This isn't a market unlike we've ever seen before. And I think that these growing pains and this volatility really does create opportunity. You know, certainly we've seen real violence in the markets year to date, but we're now getting to levels, particularly outside of equities. But when you look at fixed income markets, that, you know, optically at least are the most attractive that they've been in a very, very long time. I mean, with 10-year bonds now yielding, you know, upwards of 3% and even cash rates offering pretty chunky yields, it's the first time where you can actually feel like fixed income actually offers value in markets.
And Erin, I know that PIMCO has come out with this call that there's starting to be a lot of value, particularly even in duration. And I'm wondering how you frame this out in terms of near-term versus long-term bonds, where in the world you would go for duration, and how much you are fully invested. I mean, how much is your conviction in this fixed income call?
Sure. So I wouldn't rush into buying anything, you know, sort of blindly right now. I still think that we're going to have some pains over the next couple of weeks and months as inflation starts to stabilize. Really what we're looking for to get, you know, much more bullish in terms of buying fixed income is starting to see inflation stabilize and start to roll over. We're not there yet. We probably have through the summer a couple of more painful months. That said, I think that you can start looking at duration more attractively as you own against fixed across a broader multi-asset perspective, just given the fact that at least from a correlation perspective, it's starting to be somewhat more negatively correlated to risk assets. Also, when you look at IG bonds, they're starting to look pretty attractive. I still think that high yield, just given some of the negative convexity in those owning those assets, still has probably more downside to go, particularly in the riskier credits. But particularly against IG bonds and some high quality duration bonds, you know, I would start to, you know, dip my toe in now.
So, Erin, just to get a sense of the timing and just the progression of how you see the opportunity arising, you would dip your toe in now, but remain in cash or remain in liquid fixed income, and then wait for what before you become more fully invested in fixed income?
I think owning a little bit of cash, a little bit of sort of shorter duration corporates, and a little bit of duration makes sense, you know, as sort of very highly liquid instruments. And then as you start to see inflation really crest, that's the time when you're going to want to start to buy fixed income, you know, more holistically within your portfolio. You know, the one thing that I would say is that we've been in a market where duration's been selling off largely as a result of inflation, but we're coming to a point where each incremental basis point higher in inflation is really tipping the scales of the U.S. economy closer and closer into a recession, albeit likely a soft, you know, sort of recession or a shallow recession, but it is getting closer and closer. And so at this point, we're really quickly moving from late cycle, into recessionary conditions. And that's where you want to start to increase fixed income within your portfolio.
So when Tony Crescenzi and Jerome Schneider are going at it, there's got to be a tip point on inflation where you act. And PIMCO's been just incredibly accurate on this. Is that tip point off headline inflation or some custom core inflation index you have?
So we do have a custom core inflation index, but right now what is impacting the consumer are necessities, and that's shelter, that's food, and that's inflation. Ultimately, that's what the pocketbook...
You link those into your financial instruments.
Yeah, you have to, because that's ultimately
well, tell that
what's...
to Jerome Powell, does he? I don't think so.
No, I mean, I think, and I think that's why you may have the Fed tighten into an earlier than expected recession, because ultimately that's what's hitting the pocketbooks in terms of consumers right now. And that's what, you've already started to see non-necessities roll over in terms of inflation. But what inflation keeps ticking higher on are those necessities. And that's ultimately what's going to, create a shallow consumer recession. We're already, I think, in an Amazon recession right now. We've already seen retail goods, durable goods spending start to roll over. And I think that that's, an early canary in the coal mine for what's to come, in the broader economy.
Erin, awesome to hear from you as always. Erin Brown there of PIMCO, already in what she called there, Tom, an Amazon recession for retail, for consumers.
Well, that's
right
what we heard from Goldman Sachs as well. I just look at girls who invest, and can you imagine Erin Brown got the girls who invest sophomores all into that Austrian piece, that 100-year Austrian piece, and they're down like 70% like I am.
That was your investment advice.
That was my investment
advice.
Not
Erin's back then at the time. Lorena Mester of the Cleveland Fed has just come out with some really interesting remarks, and we've written up the story, so allow me to bring you a paragraph of that. Fed research shows that it's more costly for policymakers to be wrong about inflation expectations being well anchored when they're not, as opposed to erroneously assuming they are rising when they're actually well anchored. That tells you something about where they see the balance of risks here, Tom, and why the likes of Lorena Mester are looking to front-load this effort.
I mentioned this yesterday off of Jean Bovin, and Philip Hildenbrand was brilliant on this. This is going to be a huge debate. John, this really alludes to Jackson Hole going back to 2005 and Olivier Blanchard and the confidence that we have in stability of inflation.
She is in Camp 75. Elisa, going into that July Fed meeting.
A lot of people with her, front-loading. Expect that to be the word of the day.
Futures right now up 1/3% on the S&P, on the Nasdaq 100 up 1/4. In around about 48 minutes, you will hear from Chairman Powell, President Lagarde, Governor Bailey, sitting around a table with Francine Lacqua of Bloomberg. Cannot wait for that. Looking forward to it. Full coverage right here on Bloomberg.
Now with the latest news from New York City and around the world, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, Lisa, John, thank you. On the first full day of meetings at the NATO summit in Madrid, President Biden pledged to boost land, sea, and air power in Europe in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
In a moment where Putin has shattered peace in Europe and attacked the very, very tenets of rule-based order, the United States and our allies, we're going to step up. We're stepping up. We're proving that NATO is more needed now than it ever has been, and it's as important as it ever has been.
President Biden also said the entry of Finland and Sweden into NATO will make the alliance strong and will make member countries more secure. Yesterday, Turkey dropped its objections to Finland and Sweden joining the alliance. Reaction still continues from yesterday's jaw-dropping testimony before the House January 6th committee. The panel heard from White House aides who says that she learned of a physical altercation between the president and the Secret Service just before the attack on the Capitol. Cassidy Hutchinson recounted a conversation with her boss, former Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, after then Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani told her that they would be going to the Capitol on the 6th, and it would be a great day.
I remember leaning against the doorway and saying, I just had an interesting conversation with Rudy. Mark, sounds like we're going to go to the Capitol. He didn't look up from his phone and said something to the effect of, there's a lot going on, Cass, but I don't know, things might get real, real bad on January 6th.
Hutchinson said both Meadows and Giuliani sought pardons after the attack. Mr. Trump called the story fake. Colorado Republicans have rejected 2 prominent election deniers in primaries last night. Mesa County Clerk Tina Peters lost the Republican primary for Secretary of State to Pam Anderson, a former clerk in suburban Denver. State Representative Ron Hanks lost his bid for the GOP Senate nomination. Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios, this is Global News, 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts from more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg.
Get Bloomberg surveillance anytime, anywhere. Subscribe to our daily podcast on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, and all your favorite platforms. Stay informed with the latest in finance, economics, and investment on the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast.
Bay State Business Time is 8:14. Time now for a check of traffic. Here's Malcolm Alter. Malcolm.
Thank you, Karen. This report is sponsored by Mattress Firm. Right now in Littleton, 495 northbound, you have a left-lane rollover right near Route 119. On Route 95 in Norwood, look out for a left-lane accident just north of Neponset Street causing delays. You're hung up again around the Dedham Street overpass, getting onto Route 128. They're still about to haul away a broken-down box truck on the Tobin Bridge right before the Everett Avenue on-ramp. It's in the right lane. Celebrate great sleep at Mattress Firm's July 4th sale. Stop in today and shop Tempur-Pedic to save $500 on Tempur-Breeze mattresses. Plus, you'll get a $300 instant gift towards sleep accessories. I'm Malcolm Alter with the best ride in and out of the city on Bloomberg, 106.1 Boston, Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2. Karen.
Right, Malcolm, thank you. Now let's get a check of weather. Here's Rob Carolyn. Rob.
Karen, mostly sunny conditions continue as just some high cloudiness drifts across the Boston area. Temperatures 80 to 85 this afternoon. We've got high pressure to our north. Tonight, the front goes by, partly cloudy skies, maybe an isolated shower, 65. It's back to sunshine tomorrow. Highs once again 80 to 85. Then a hot day on Friday. Sunny 90 to 95. Saturday, we could have some showers and storms. Drive time, traffic, and weather updates all morning long. I'm Rob Carolyn on Bloomberg, 106.1 Boston, Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2. Karen?
All right, Rob, thank you. And currently it is 64 degrees in Natick, it is 67 in Cambridge, and 66 in Scituate. This is Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Newburyport, 92.9 HD2.
Live from Sintra, Portugal, Bloomberg speaks with Jerome Powell.
We're looking for something specific, and that is progress on inflation.
Christine Lagarde.
We are turning our back to negative interest rates.
And Andrew Bailey.
We think there are risks on the upside to inflation.
The Fed Chair, ECB President, and BOE governors sit down with Bloomberg's Francine Lacqua at the ECB Forum on Central Banking. This morning at 9, only on Bloomberg 106.1 and Bloomberg Television.
Former New Jersey Governor Tom Kean remains one of the boldest voices on the national stage when it comes to education and the value of public research universities. That's why he's a strong champion for New Jersey Institute of Technology and NJIT's role as an engine for economic growth.
NJIT is the kind of place where you see people coming together, students, professors, state, business, and they're coming together to create new technologies. And that's where business is going to combine with industry. That's where a lot of things can happen. It's about science. It's about technology. It's about all these subjects coming together to create the kind of future and create the kind of jobs which this country needs. NJIT, an institution like that, is absolutely essential. I mean, that's where the research is going to be done. That's where these ideas are going to be born. And that's where the discoveries are going to be made.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
This June, in honor of Pride Month and Juneteenth, Bloomberg brings you a special equality series every Thursday in June at 1 p.m. Eastern. Bloomberg Equality, celebrating inclusion this Pride Month and all year long.
This is a Volcker-esque type of Fed where they are clearly focused on getting inflation down, and they are not going to throw away 40 years of credibility. They're not going to throw that credibility away just because the markets are telling me.
Greg Peters of PGIM, he is not constructive on this equity market. Speaking on the Federal Reserve, we'll hear from the Fed Chair Jay Powell in about 40 minutes' time. Futures right now up 1/3% on the S&P, on the Nasdaq up 1/4% also. Downside surprise on German CPI relative to what we expected, let's say yesterday. Once we got the regional breakdown of Germany this morning, it was largely expected. Euro dollar down about 1/10, 105.11. Yields in 2 basis points or so on a 10-year, 314.72. And just in the break there, I was working through that note, that speech, those remarks from Fed President Lorena Mester over in Sintra, Portugal. It's really interesting stuff. This is a massive change at this Fed, and you can see them working through it in real time. Here's the quote, Tom. The current challenging situation in which a sequence of supply shocks have contributed to inflation being at 40-year highs calls into question the conventional view that monetary policy should always look through supply shocks. In some circumstances, such shocks could threaten the stability of inflation expectations and would require policy action. It's the world we've been in, Tom, in the last 18 months.
She is the mathematician of the Fed. She's prodigious ability here at the dynamics that we're seeing now. I would say John Williams joins her in that ability out of Columbia, and Barnard and Princeton as well. But, John, it speaks to the uncertainties as we go to this panel now in about 40 minutes. Kit Jukes to join us in a bit. John, do note Brent crude out near 120. We're on our way up.
WTI 113, Tom, just creeping higher again.
Greg Villiers with us on the elections, on what we learned in the, I guess no, it's not the first Tuesday of June. We're late in June. But anyways, we had an election with some real results. Greg, I want to go to what the Democrats need to do to not focus inside the Beltway and have a Democratic Party strategy across this nation. Kate Zerinke in the New York Times destroyed the Democrats this weekend, saying they've simply failed to go across the nation in organization.
Yeah, you would think they'd be doing a lot better, Tom, on so many issues. I think that there is a need for something more unified. Maybe the abortion issue will finally get the party together. It's given them a catalyst. But you and she and her piece are right. There's a lack of unity and strategy. A single sentence in your note this morning on the governor of California. What does good Mr. Newsom need to do? Well, I think he's running. He's starting to run some ads. I think he's making noise like he may run. Everybody's frozen in place right now because of Joe Biden. If Biden announces he's going to seek a second term, which I doubt, but if he does, that changes everything. If he doesn't, I think Newsom runs, and believe it or not, don't shoot the messenger here, I think Hillary Clinton may give thought to one last run.
Wait, what? Say that one more time, Greg?
Yes.
Sorry, I can't let that go.
Yeah, I mean, I do. There's been a lot of speculation in the last few days that if Biden doesn't run and the Democrats don't have any clear favorite, that she might hop into the race. She's 74. That makes her, fairly young by today's standards. But I don't rule out one last run by her if Biden doesn't run.
Well, there's a lot to go on that particular line of questioning, Greg, but I do want to go back to the task at hand for all legislators right now, which is trying to deal with inflation, which is the primary concern for a lot of investors, the social issues creeping up in terms of priorities for some voters. But is there any chance that this Congress could really take action in a material way from a legislative stance in terms of financing different kinds of programs or offsetting some of the inflationary pressures, given the lack of unity and given the polarization that you were just talking about?
Logically, you would think the answer would be yes, they will. But logic does not dominate Washington. And I think that while there's a lot of talk about tariffs, a lot of talk about other programs that might help a little at the margin on inflation, I don't see it. Frankly, I think Ukraine is more important. And as long as this war continues, we're going to have high energy prices, high food prices. I think that's the bigger factor.
So, Greg, if that does spur some sort of recession, where is the fiscal impulse to respond?
Typically, doing the exact wrong thing at the exact wrong time, you're going to see Congress now get very frugal. Not a lot of spending. Republicans will take the House. They don't want to spend a lot of money. So just when you have monetary policy tightening, you're going to see fiscal policy tightening as well.
Greg, frame it for me. A Sunday evening, the end of March, 1968. Lyndon Baines Johnson, overwhelmed by Vietnam, among others, said, I'm not going to run again. I was sitting on the couch. I remember it clear as a bell, a nation stunned. What is Biden waiting for, or does he have to wait for March of 2024?
Well, the march that you refer to with LBJ occurs on November 8th. Here in the U.S., that's the election. And if the House flips, which I still think is likely, Senate is a tougher call now because of abortion. But, that could slip as well. I think that would be the catalyst to push Biden out.
Okay.
It's not just his age. It's his polling numbers and the elections on November 8th.
Greg, we've got to talk about the other ticket. Just briefly, that testimony yesterday. I want your view on this. Does that change the support that the former president gets, and does that open the door a little bit wider for the governor from Florida?
John, June of the year 2022 will be remembered as the month that pretty much finished off Donald Trump. It's not just that he may get indicted. It's not just that he has lost some altitude in the party. It's the mere fact that more and more of his own supporters are telling poll takers that one turn's enough. We really are not excited about him running again. And that's his own supporters who are now starting to say that.
That's the one to watch for sure. Greg, thank you. Greg Vanier of AGF Investments. Music to the ears, I imagine, Tom, of a certain Governor Ron DeSantis down in Florida.
I read his biography the other day. I think the guy, it's somebody that we're learning. I mean, down south, obviously, he's really known, and he's known well within Republican circles, but he has an extraordinary biography. I was really quite taken by the history. I'd say, John, it's somebody that, I've got to get to know, is how I'd put it.
I agree. I think a lot of people have got to get to know him, Tom.
Yeah.
And that testimony yesterday, we're going to be talking about that for a long, long time. We'll be talking about a certain panel coming up in about 35 minutes' time. A whole lot more on Bloomberg TV and on Bloomberg. That repeatedly through the last 24 hours. It's 35 minutes away.
Now, let's not forget Augustine Carstens. What there is some intellectual firepower at this panel.
I feel bad for
all
Carstens.
From different walks of life.
Who, of course, Tom, we've sat down with frequently over the years, but ultimately it's about the other three on this occasion, isn't it?
Yeah, I go with that, but it's what they don't say.
Futures up 1/10 of 1% on the S&P. Yields in a single basis point on a 10-year, 315.66. Tom, laser-eyed, focused on crude, 113, almost 50 on WTI. From New York, this is Bloomberg.
Get Bloomberg surveillance anytime, anywhere. Subscribe to our daily podcast on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, and all your favorite platforms. Stay informed with the latest in finance, economics, and investment on the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast.
It's evening at the steakhouse, but Pete's reading his phone instead of the menu. Why? He's on bankofamerica.com, learning how the economy is digesting higher food prices. It's his go-to source for cutting-edge insights and trends.
For insights so impressive, you can't stop getting smarter. Visit bankofamerica.com/smarter. What would you like the power to do?
Bank of America N.A., member FDIC.
This is Emily Chang, inviting you to join me for Bloomberg Technology, a new daily podcast focusing exclusively on technology, innovation, and the future of business. We'll bring you the latest headlines from Silicon Valley's top companies and conversations with tech's biggest decision makers.
I think guests know Disney's going to do it right.
Building a road to space. Is Uber going to accept crypto in the future? Absolutely.
The Bloomberg Technology Podcast. Subscribe today on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or at Bloomberg.com.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg 1061 Boston to Rayport and 92.9 HD2.
And good morning. Bay State business time is 8:27, 70 degrees, partly sunny skies at Logan Airport this morning, and it's going to be a sunny day ahead. The high temperature right around the mid-80s. Here are some of the other stories we're following this morning. State lawmakers are poised to vote today on a reproductive health bill. Top Democrats say they're feeling a sense of urgency in the wake of last week's Supreme Court ruling that eliminated the constitutional right to an abortion. The House yesterday gave initial approval to the 21-page bill shielding providers of reproductive and gender consider affirming care and their patients from out-of-state legal action. And Speaker Ron Mariano said a full vote on the bill is planned for today. The Mass High-Tech Council just held a summit on the need for local companies to shore up their cybersecurity defenses. And we get more from Bloomberg's Janet Wu.
Cyber attacks, particularly ransomware, continue to spike. Corey Thomas, CEO of Boston-based cybersecurity firm Rapid7, says defense starts with the culture of every company.
It's something that's a permanent part of the way that we work and the way that we get work done. And I would say the cultural thing is the thing that's most likely to give you the best level of security.
He was joined by executives from McKinsey, MITRE, and other companies addressing the need for more cyber resiliency. Janet Wu, Bloomberg 106.1, Boston Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2.
Thanks, Janet. And you can hear more from the Cyber Summit coming up today on Bloomberg Bay State Business. Well, Uber and Lyft drivers still rallying over their employment status. And we get more from Bloomberg's Ann Mostu.
Even after the Supreme Court struck a ballot question about driver employment status, rideshare and delivery drivers who supported the question are holding a rally at the State House today to discuss next steps. Some drivers want to remain independent and set their own hours and schedules, while others want to be full-time employees with benefits. Ann Mostu, Bloomberg 106.1, Boston Newburyport, and 92.9 HD2.
Thanks, Ann. The father of a missing girl from Manchester, New Hampshire, is in more legal trouble after additional indictments were filed against him. Prosecutors say the latest charges against Adam Montgomery are connected to a rifle and shotgun that he allegedly stole back in 2019. Montgomery's daughter Harmony has not been seen alive in years, and these new charges are not related to her disappearance. It is currently 70 degrees, partly sunny skies at Logan Airport. This is Bloomberg 106.1 Boston.